through every shift, every milestone, and every triumph. Not just reporting history, but shaping the conversations that define Africa's future. For brands, media planning, and advertisers, Channel Africa is more than just a platform. It's an opportunity. With 25 compelling shows covering current affairs, sports, business, music, and lifestyle, we deliver an engaging Pan-African audience ready to connect, invest, and act. Multi-award winning, internationally recognized, digitally accessible across the globe. When Africa speaks, the world listens, and Channel Africa makes sure of it. For business, for culture, for Africa, partner with Channel Africa because Africa's voice is the future. Africa is a story, a living, breathing, ever-evolving masterpiece. And for over 5 decades now, one voice has told it like no other. Channel Africa. More than just a broadcaster, Channel Africa is the pulse of the continent, African-led, African-run, and deeply rooted in its heritage. It's the only international station that speaks to Africa in its own voices: English, Kiswahili, Chinyanja, French, and Portuguese. The languages that unite 1 billion people. We have been there through every shift, every milestone, and every triumph. Not just reporting history, but shaping the conversations that define Africa's future. For brands, media planning, and advertisers, Channel Africa is more than just a platform. It's an opportunity. With 25 compelling shows covering current affairs, sports, business, music, and lifestyle, we deliver an engaging Pan-African audience ready to connect, invest, and act. Multi-award winning, internationally recognized, digitally accessible across the globe. When Africa speaks, the world listens, and Channel Africa makes sure of it. For business, for culture, for Africa, partner with Channel Africa because Africa's voice is the future. Africa is a story, a living, breathing, ever-evolving masterpiece. And for over 5 decades now, one voice has told it like no other. Channel Africa. More than just a broadcaster, Channel Africa is the pulse of the continent, African-led, African-run, and deeply rooted in its heritage. It's the only international station that speaks to Africa in its own voices: English, Kiswahili, Chinyanja, French, and Portuguese. The languages that unite 1 billion people. We have been there through every shift, every milestone, and every triumph. Not just reporting history, but shaping the conversations that define Africa's future. For brands, media planning, and advertisers, Channel Africa is more than just a platform. It's an opportunity. With 25 compelling shows covering current affairs, sports, business, music, and lifestyle, we deliver an engaging Pan-African audience ready to connect, invest, and act. Multi-award winning, internationally recognized, digitally accessible across the globe. When Africa speaks, the world listens, and Channel Africa makes sure of it. For business, for culture, for Africa, partner with Channel Africa because Africa's voice is the future. Africa is a story, a living, breathing, ever-evolving masterpiece. And for over 5 decades now, one voice has told it like no other. Channel Africa. More than just a broadcaster, Channel Africa is the pulse of the continent, African-led, African-run, and deeply rooted in its heritage. It's the only international station that speaks to Africa in its own voices: English, Kiswahili, Chinyanja, French, and Portuguese. The languages that unite 1 billion people. We have been there through every shift, every milestone, and every triumph. Not just reporting history, but shaping the conversations that define Africa's future. For brands, media planning, and advertisers, Channel Africa is more than just a platform. It's an opportunity. With 25 compelling shows covering current affairs, sports, business, music, and lifestyle, we deliver an engaging Pan-African audience ready to connect, invest, and act. Multi-award winning, internationally recognized, digitally accessible across the globe. When Africa speaks.
Time Africa on www.channelafrica.co.za. Good morning. Top of the morning to you. I'm Peter Ndoro. Good morning.
I am Asanda Beda. Very good morning. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in as we are with you for the next 3 hours on this Wednesday, the 7th of May. Thanks to the team on technical production is Katu Madala, social media, talent Butelezi, production, Hlengiwe and Joey and Pumuzo, on news is Onel Nzinzi, sports, Musibudi Makura, and economics news, Chanduko Ligege. We'll tell you what's coming up after the news in terms of our programming. Let's say good morning now at 2 minutes past 6 Central African time to Onel Nzinzi with our news, and then Musibudi Makura will follow with sports headlines.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Good morning, Asanda, and a very good morning to our listeners. South Africa's Constitutional Court has scrapped the Section 6.1 of the South African Citizenship Act of 1995. Section 6.1 stipulates that South Africans lose their citizenship if they voluntarily acquire another nationality, unless they apply for and obtain retention from the Minister of Home Affairs beforehand. In his ruling, Justice Stephen Majid said the act should be scrapped from the date of its promulgation on October 6, 1995. The Supreme Court of Appeal, or SCA, previously ruled that the section was unconstitutional, but the Court had to ratify the judgment. Meanwhile, South Africa's Democratic Alliance Party has welcomed the Apex Court's ruling in favour of the party's application to secure the citizenship of South Africans with dual nationality. The DA says the ruling is a culmination of a 10-year legal battle to restore the citizenship of South Africans who lost their citizenship after obtaining a second nationality without receiving a retention of citizenship letter beforehand. The Concord ruling also means that all South Africans who inadvertently lost their citizenship have the right to get it restored. Visa applications from nationalities thought most likely to overstay their claim asylum in the UK could be restricted under a new government crackdown. According to Home Affairs Office's plans, people from countries such as Pakistan, Nigeria and Sri Lanka may find it more difficult to come to the UK to work and study. Ministers believe there is a particular problem with those who come to the UK legally on work or study visas and then lodge a claim of asylum, which is, if granted, would allow them to stay in the country permanently. A Home Office spokesperson said the upcoming immigration white paper will set out a comprehensive plan to restore order to the UK's broken immigration system. Latest Home Affairs Office's figures show that more than 108,000 people claimed asylum in the UK last year alone, the highest level since records began in 1979. The Border Management Authority of South Africa says drones that have been deployed to boost border security at various ports of entry across the country are playing a major role in assisting to clamp down on human trafficking syndicates. More than 100 human trafficking facilitators were arrested using the drone footage over the last 2 weeks. The Commissioner of the Border Management Authority, Michael Masiapato, says the drones allowed response teams to operate more efficiently along key vulnerable segments of the country's land border line. He was speaking during the Africa Border Security Week gathering in Cape Town yesterday.
the drones were able to enable us to arrest around 112 facilitators. And these are the individuals that had been causing a lot of illegal migration into the country from our neighboring countries, particularly from Zimbabwe, from Lesotho, as well as Mozambique. So on that basis, all of those facilitators, as we arrested, we basically brought them into the country. We opened a case against them for aiding and abetting in the respective police stations. And as we speak, they're facing the might of the law according to Section 49(2) of the Immigration Act.
Lastly, China has angrily condemned job adverts released by the CIA aimed at recruiting delusioned Chinese officials. Last week, the CIA released a series of videos targeting Chinese government employees. The Foreign Ministry said there were evidence of despicable methods used by the U.S. intelligence agency to steal secrets from other countries. Lin Jian is the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson.
The United States not only maliciously smears and attacks China, but also blatantly deceives and lures Chinese personnel to turn side, and even directly targets Chinese government officials. This is a serious violation of China's national interests and a naked political provocation.
Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news, the Sawa Inter Milan beat Barcelona in an all-time classic to reach the UEFA Champions League final. And the Proteas women need to beat India today in their third ODI Tri-Series match. Details of these and other stories coming up at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Every morning after the 6 o'clock news, we bring you a concise roundup of the top stories from across the continent that played out in the last 24 hours. And we do this to keep you informed and up to date. And helping us is our team of reporters, analysts, and experts that provide a context for you. And we kick off with this story as we look at the Africa Roundup. Drone strikes have hit a major power station in the Sudanese city of Port Sudan on Tuesday, causing a complete power outage. Explosions and huge fires were reported near the city's main international airport as paramilitary forces targeted the key city for the third consecutive day.
Thick plumes of smoke rose from the area near the port, and Sudan's electricity company said the substation had been hit, causing a complete power outage. A major hotel close to the residence of Sudan's military leader, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, was also said to have been hit. Port Sudan has enjoyed relative calm since the civil war erupted in April 2023. It became a base for the army-aligned government after the Sudanese armed forces lost control of much of the capital Khartoum at the start of their conflict with the Paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or RSF. Hundreds of thousands of displaced people have sought refuge in the city. UN officials, diplomats and agencies have also set up headquarters in Port Sudan.
The UN Refugee Agency is gravely concerned by the rapidly increasing number of Sudanese refugees crossing into eastern Chad. Nearly 20,000 people, mostly women and children, have arrived there in the past 2 weeks alone. Deputy spokesperson for the UN Secretary-General Farhan Haq tells us more.
The sudden influx reflects the escalating violence in Sudan's North Darfur region, particularly in and around El Fasher, which is triggering mass displacement. Refugees arriving in Chad report that over 10,000 people are still en route, trying to reach the border to escape the violence. A rapid protection assessment by UNHCR and its partners indicates that 76% of the newly arrived refugees were subjected to serious protection incidents, including extortion, theft, and sexual violence. Chad already hosts 1.3 million refugees, including 794,000 arrivals from Sudan since the conflict started more than 2 years ago.
The International Monetary Fund, the IMF, says that Zambia's economic recovery program has responded to the needs of citizens in ways that many thought were impossible. IMF Deputy Managing Director Nigel Clark says that the reforms have provided more human capital in the health and education sectors.
Social spending, social support spending, has more than doubled from 0.7% of GDP to 1.7% of GDP, which means that the vulnerable population has been able to receive more support from the government, more than twice as much as prior to this reform effort. In addition to that, the government has been able to reprioritize and implement free education to the benefit of millions of Zambian children.
There's a great deal of anticipation as the conclave is set to elect a new pope in the Vatican City. The new pope will replace the late Pope Francis, who passed away last month due to a stroke and heart failure. Trent Murray has more from Rome.
133 of them, these cardinal electors that are tasked with the job of finding a new leader for the Catholic Church. They've all been flying in the past 48 hours or so. There are a number of names in the mix as potential favourites, including several from the African continent, including the cardinal from Guinea, the cardinal from Congo, and also the cardinal from Ghana. If either of those three men were to be successful, it would be the first African pope in 1,500 years and the first one ever from sub-Sahara Africa. So, look, I mean, quite literally, the eyes of the world are on this, and it's going to be a very, very interesting conclave.
And finally, in Nigeria's southeastern region of Ikom, rising cocoa prices are attracting a wave of new players to the industry. Known locally as cocoa boys, these newcomers are seizing the opportunity in one of the country's key cocoa growing hubs. David Dorr picks up the story.
Driven by rising prices, a cohort of mostly men have been switching their careers to farming. They're known as cocoa boys.
If you're calling me a cocoa boy, I'll accept gladly.
Mark Bassi left his job as a medical laboratory scientist to become a grower in his ancestral home.
When you hear about this cocoa, there's this mentality, this understanding that comes into you. Those guys are big boys.
The Cocoa Farmers Association of Nigeria, which represents smallholder farmers, says it saw its membership increase by more than 10,000 in 2023 to 2024. According to the ICCO, Nigeria is the world's fourth largest cocoa producer, though its output is far behind Ghana and Ivory Coast.
And that's how we come to the end of the Wednesday, the 7th of May's edition of Africa Roundup here on Africa Rise and Shine.
Get the news, music, and lifestyle of Africa on Channel Africa, the African perspective. Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine, weekdays 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
At 14 minutes past 6 Central African Time, let's take a look at some of the stories making headlines in the West Africa region. As you know, every day we focus on an area on our African continent in terms of what you need to know. We're joined on the line by political analyst Dr. David Matsanga. Dr. Matsanga, how are you on this Wednesday?
Very, very well, and a good morning, Africa, across the continent. But this continent is amazing.
Okay, there we are. Now I found you. I think I wasn't connected properly. Yeah, I thought I was already in. Okay, well, thanks for making time. It's always great catching up with you on these important stories. Let's start in Mali, Doctor, where the junta leader there has gotten backing to serve as president for the next 5 years. What contributed to Colonel Assimi Goïta securing power until 2030?
Thank you very much. First of all, I have been to those countries, as I told your station last week, 6 times. I've gone into Mali. I've compared the development, the economy of a civilian government, which was there before, corrupt, inept, with this current government of the captain who is in power. If you look at the things, the streets in Bamako, things are changing. You feel that you are somewhere in Africa. You want your money, you change it. You want to change money to go outside, you have no hassle. So the people of Mali have seen. You look at the fight against terrorism, insurgency, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, the guys doing it. You look at new Land Rovers, medical equipment arriving, cars with doctors seated in, going to drive into villages. He's doing it. Now, surely given the situation that he's doing what he's doing in Mali, who can refuse a service? You are looking for democracy, which you don't understand what it means. The only country in Africa that understands democracy is where you are.
South Africa.
You still understand democracy. You vote and go home. Some countries in Africa don't vote and go home.
So, Dr. Matsanga, would you say that this then further entrenches military rule there in Mali?
No.
And therefore...
I am not saying so.
Okay.
I'm not saying I want to call upon the military, but we have to be... You see, one of the problems that Africa...
But does, my question, Dr. Matsanga, is does it not then make almost a favor of military rule over the promise that was earlier made for civilian rule and democracy?
I am telling you, we have to review the chapter. The Charter of African Union must be reviewed. A good military government in Rwanda, for example, has worked and made the country very proud. Is there any problem there? Is there any problem there? A good military leadership in Burkina Faso is building roads, schools, hospitals, water pipes. Is there a problem there? We should accommodate these younger men. As people who have been there, who saw the charter in 1963, some of us were born. Most of you were not born. We should change the charter. What do we do to a man who has picked up a gun to come and overthrow a government instead of eliminating him? Banned, B-A-N-N-E-D, banned, go. You are banned, you go out, and be stay there in the cold. Let's embrace a younger man. Let's be prodigal. Let's have more prodigal sons coming back to AU. Look at what we did in West Africa. We gave these people a chance, my sister, to form their own organization. They are now in their own organization. They have broken away from ECOWAS. Why don't we embrace them, hold them on table and say, we disagree with the military, but form a channel, form a transition towards a civilian rule.
So what will it mean for regional relations? You speak of that support as much as we talk of the stability within Mali, but regionally, how does this look?
Is it worse? Isn't it worse, my sister? Have you ever been to Nigeria? Can you travel 1 kilometer of a Tamaka road before bandits abduct you? What makes it different with a state like that? I'm just asking, because we are talking to Africa now. These are facts. These are facts on ground. In Nigeria, in northern Nigeria, which borders Mali and Niger, you can't travel safely. You need 7 bodyguards. And when you have bodyguards, Boko Haram will come and kidnap you. So where's the state, which is calling itself a civilian elected democratic state of Nigeria? What is the difference? ECOWAS is funded by who? By France. France manages ECOWAS, pays money for their accommodation, salaries, projects. What is ECOWAS? What is ECOWAS? We make organizations in Africa and use them wrongly. ECOWAS has no money, my sister. ECOWAS gets money from France. And the money is got from Africa, from Burkina Faso, from Mali, from Niger, collected under uranium France sells, then gives us peanuts. Oh, Africa.
Okay, let's move to Gabon, Doctor. The new leader in Gabon, we were talking about this earlier, who was elected on Sunday. I mean, not elected, but inaugurated. Brice Ngwema had said that he wants to remove the position of Prime Minister from further administrations. He's now appointed 2 vice presidents. Is this why there are 2 vice presidents? Because there's no longer the position of Prime Minister in Gabon.
First of all, for me, I don't recognize that guy. There is a difference with me recognizing the guys in Sahel, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali. I recognize them. Why? They are working for their people. The boy, that boy there, you call him leader. I don't call him a leader. This is a junta guy who just removed the uniform, and African Union is playing with us, with our minds. He removed the uniform, no transition. He did not make a plan to the AU. He did not put us which type of election. He did not allow people to campaign. He just removed the uniform and a pistol. He walks around in going to visit other presidents with pistols, threatening them. When he just got it, when some of us got pistols in 1978, when he was not born even. So let me tell you frankly, speak frankly, there is nothing like, I'm waiting to see if African Union will recognize this guy. If you recognize this guy, then you recognize everybody. Because he just took power in 1 year, 2 years, removed his... The former head of state has not been allowed to go for medical treatment. And you people in South Africa, Ramaphosa will come to African Union to sit and vote for this. I call him a goon. He's a goon in Gabon. He's not a leader. He's not a leader. I can't. Do I need to go to Gabon for what?
Well, okay, but I mean, either way, for the purposes of this conversation, we do have to talk about his cabinet that he's named, whether you recognize him or not.
Let's talk about.
Let's talk about that. So, Doctor, it's gone to 30 members now. That cabinet, down from 35 under the transitional military government. What do you make of this cropping?
It is a very bad. It is again doing the same thing like Bongo did. What is the difference here? He's bringing in cronies from the army, former generals, former technical class who work with France. Why hasn't the coup? Why wasn't the coup condemned by France? Why? Ask. You younger generation in Africa, wake up and ask questions. Why is that coup not condemned like the coup in Burkina Faso? Because the coup in Burkina Faso is different. I am looking at the Commonwealth, which we have just... I campaigned so hard for Madame from Ghana to get that seat. And she's not going to take this nonsense. If Gabon is allowed in the Commonwealth, I will tell Uganda to remove itself from the Commonwealth. If Nigeria continues to be in the Commonwealth, we have to go back to those days when these organizations were biting it, ladies and gentlemen, across Africa. If you misbehave, Abacha misbehaved, we kicked him out of Commonwealth. Why are we allowing people with blood on their hands, like Paul Biya, like Gabon man, like Nigeria, to be in the Commonwealth or African Union? Why? Time has come for us to rethink. He can appoint 30 ministers, 200 ministers, still remains a lion, a leopard. That has not changed the spot.
30% of the cabinet is made up of women leadership. Do their positions reflect a real potential for them to be able to make influence, in your view?
On women, that's okay. Because he even took over his friend's wife. So is there a difference? You want me to tell you that that's okay for women positions. But this is a man who has shown you that he even took over the former president's wife. Yes. So what type of manners are these? It's good to appoint women in positions. My sister, when we are talking to the world, let's talk frankly. Let's change Africa. One of the problems that people fear in Africa to speak is to tell the truth. They tell lies. And then they go to church and they say, God help us. How will God help you when you have already made too many lies? Let's speak the truth. This man took over power, even was interested in the man's wife. Everybody knows he never detained the wife. He took over the wife, called the wife, because he had detained the brother who is the president. How do presidents in Africa feel when a democratically elected president is in jail and somebody takes over your wife? And then you tell me, as they appointed 3 women, or what? I'm not from Gabon. I'm from a part of Africa. I stand high, and I'm a Pan-African. At this age, I am not going to fear Ramaphosa, to fear anybody, to fear Tinubu, to be, I tell them, because we're in the same age bracket, we are going home. God is going to call us, man. We are going home. We have to leave a better Africa for the younger generation. Let's proceed.
Let's proceed to Ghana then, Doctor. The country is battling human trafficking there. Police have arrested 2 suspected traffickers and 33 people were rescued in that operation. This is part of a partnership between Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire. How did this partnership come about, first of all?
Human trafficking is a bad sign for every Africa, an African country. And in the international law, is not allowed. The UN Charter is very clear on human trafficking. It is true. There is something wrong going on in those states, especially the states around the Sahel region. People are exported, they go, you find so many people on the ships in Dakar, in Senegal, and so many crossing over to Sahara into Mediterranean Sea. But the cooperation with which state? Ghana is an English-speaking state. Cote d'Ivoire is a French puppet colony that still remains on the continent of Africa, with Ouattara taking over Cote d'Ivoire when he's from Burkina Faso. Everybody knows the record where he was born. He's not from there. So for me, whatever Ouattara does, again, my sister, I'm not interested. We were the last people with Thabo Mbeki to leave that airport when we were begging the French not to allow Cote d'Ivoire to go to chaos. So the human trafficking, stopping of it is very good. It's something that we should allow the Ghanaian government and their government in Cote d'Ivoire for working on to stop our brothers being killed on seas, trafficked. You saw a case in London of a Ugandan judge who was sentenced to 6 years for human trafficking a lady from Uganda and putting her under slavery. We have a problem here in Africa. So human trafficking is condemned. Yeah. So that's the only thing I can give a credit to Cote d'Ivoire. The rest, if you ask me, I can fall into the Atlantic Ocean.
Let's talk about the fact that we've been looking at making cross-border movements easier and more economically viable for ourselves as Africans. How will this now contribute to some who may fear that as we make cross-border movements easier, it also enables the criminals to move freely in between countries with those who are being exploited? What could we do to remove this fear?
I think you are on this one. You are 100% correct. How do we make this fear go away? First, we must tighten national laws. We must put institutions. We must not subject institutions into private corrupt systems. Why South Africa has visas on many other countries, including my own country, is because we misuse this type of entry. Most of the countries in Africa misuse when you are told, go to Ghana. For example, Ghana, if you're a black man, a black woman with an African passport, the immigration officer will look at you, smile at you, and stamp. He will not ask you why you came. He will not ask you to pay any money. So one of the reasons in Ghana, there are institutions. Ghanaian institutions is one of the countries second to South Africa that work. In elections. They don't fight. They don't throw stones like my country, Uganda, where the opposition leader is waiting to throw stones even when he has lost. So to remove this fear, we must have good institutions, national institutions, to check on those who want to do trafficking. Yes. But it should not stop us from integrating If
We're completely out of time, Dr. Matsanga. We'll leave it on that point, and thanks again for your input this Wednesday.
Thank you very much. God bless you. I've tried my level best, and I hope I've not, even if I have annoyed you, it is not my problem. It is not, you are not God.
God bless you as well, Dr. Matsanga. We appreciate your time. We have a look at West Africa region in terms of stories making headlines there. And we were joined on the line by political analyst Dr. David Matsanga. We're completely out of time, so we have to rush to news headlines. Good morning, Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Sudan's military government has cut diplomatic ties with the United Arab Emirates and declared it an aggressor state. The Sudanese defense minister accused the UAE of violating Sudan's sovereignty through what he called its proxy, the Paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. South Africans lost their citizenship due to Section 6.1 of the Citizenship Act of 1995 will now be recognized as citizens again. This follows a Constitutional Court judgment declaring the section unconstitutional. And 16 people have been arrested and 3 million pills containing fentanyl have been found in what officials say was one of the largest ever drug operations in the United States. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
And it's time to take a first look at what's been happening in the world of sport, and the Champions League's getting very exciting. Good morning, Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Very good morning from the sports desk. So we've got one team in the final of the UEFA Champions League, at least confirmed last night. Inter Milan producing a dramatic late turnaround to beat Barcelona 7-6 on aggregate in a thrilling all-time classic of the Champions League semi-final rather. It means the second time Champions League final in 3 seasons for the 3-time European champions Inter Milan, after 2 legs of incredible drama which saw 13 goals and the tie turned on its head on several occasions. Barcelona's head coach Hansi Flick expressed mixed emotions as his side were dumped out of the Champions League semi-final. The second leg at the Giuseppe Meazza mirrored the first with a 3-3 draw at half-time. However, Davide Frasetti scored a beauty in extra time to send Inter Milan to the final, winning 7-6 on aggregate. The German tactician expressed his disappointment in the outcome, but praised his team for their great effort last night.
I know that everyone is disappointed, but we could be disappointed while we are out, because we invest a lot of this match and came back again. And I think some decisions were 50-50, always for Inter, but it's like that. And we have to accept it. It's football. And at the end, but we can be proud about our performance, and this was really, I'm proud. I'm proud of my team.
On to this now. South Africa showcased their attacking prowess with a commanding 4-1 victory over Sierra Leone in the Total Energies CAF Under-20 Africa Cup of Nations tie on Tuesday evening in Ismailia. The match commenced with South Africa asserting early dominance as they looked to grab the early lead. Jody Ashene scored for the South African side in the 13th minute with a precise right-footed shot from outside the box, following a well-timed assist from Shaquille April. Despite Sierra Leone's efforts to respond, the first half concluded with South Africa leading 1-0, who were more disciplined in their defence. The second half saw Amajita intensify their offensive efforts. Nao Rabo doubled the lead on the hour mark. Sierra Leone then managed to reduce the deficit in the 69th minute when Mo Kamara found the back of the net after a cross from Osman Kamara in goal that brought back confidence to to his side. However, South Africa regained control with substitute Thabang Mahlangu making a significant impact. Mahlangu netted twice in quick succession, first in the 86th minute and then again in the 89th minute. The victory put South Africa second in the group behind Sierra Leone, who remained top of Group A, despite that disappointing loss to South Africa last night. On the local front now, Stellenbosch FC head coach Steve Barker believes the battle for top 3 finish in the Betway Premiership will go down to the wire following the commanding 3-0 victory over Golden Arrows at Mpumalanga Stadium over the weekend. Stellenbosch FC sit 4th on the table. Sekhukhune United, who drew 1-1 with Magesi FC, are currently 3rd, just 1 point ahead. Barker, who led Stellenbosch FC to a historic 3rd place and their first ever CAF Confederation Cup qualification just last season, says the race is far from over.
Yes, it will. Yeah, it'll go to the last game of the season, I'm sure. They're also playing well. They're also picking up results. So, both teams are applying pressure on each other. So I do think that'll go all the way to the wire, yes.
All right, so with just 3 matches remaining in the league for Stellenbosch FC, they face a tough test away to the champions Mamelodi Sundowns out at Loftus Versfeld in the country's capital city this coming Sunday. Barker is under no illusions about the challenge, but sees it as a key measure for their continental ambitions.
One of the best teams, if not the best team in Africa. So we know that whenever we play Sundowns, you have to be at your best. You tactically, technically, you have to execute your game plan really well. But even if you do that, they've got individual brilliance all around the park. So a tough game, but we've shown to be competitive against Sundowns. We've also got to believe that we can go there and we can get a result if we want to show that we also want to slowly become, a team that's challenging for league titles, being consistently good on the continent. So it's these type of teams like Sundowns that is a good benchmark to see where we are.
And finally, live cricket action. South Africa are currently facing off with India in their 3rd match of the ODI Tri-Series out in Sri Lanka this morning. It was the Proteas women's side who chose to bowl first after winning the toss. So India at the crease now 9 for the loss of no wickets. This after 1 over. South Africa, of course, needing to win this game to keep their hopes alive of qualifying for the final of this competition, having lost to the likes of India as well as Sri Lanka in their first 2 opening matches of this ODI Tri-Series. It's a wrap from the sports desk at the Sawa. It's 6:37 a.m. Central African Time. For any sports stories that you'd like to share with us, simply send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Alternatively, call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Mosibu Di Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Annie Kalonji sur Channel Africa.
Nous étions en train de savourer la chanson Démocratie.
Démocratie.
Ça veut dire quoi?
Démocratie, déjà, ça dérive de démocratie, qui est le régime dans lequel nous sommes, dans notre pays. Mais j'ai plutôt pensé que nous sommes plutôt dans une démocratie.
Pourquoi?
Où il y a une cruauté tellement... une méchanceté des dirigeants envers la population. En fait, dans cette chanson, je suis en train de blâmer tout le monde. Je blâme et les dirigeants, qui pour moi sont des démocrates.
Oh, je suis maintenant en train de comprendre. Donc, démocratie. Oh!
Annie Kalonji, tous les dimanches sur Mix Vibration.
Let's get our first business update now on Rise and Shine for this Wednesday. Here's Chanduko Lugege with your business news.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. South African Reserve Bank Governor Lesetja Kganyago says a secure digital consumer identity is key to reducing fraud and strengthening the resilience of the financial system. He made the remarks at the launch of the 2025 G20 Tech Sprint held under the theme Trust and Integrity, Scalable and Open Finance. Kganyago also highlighted that the safe and trusted exchange of credit data across borders could unlock access to services like real-time credit scoring. South Africa's former Director General of Trade, Industry and Competition, Lionel October, says illicit trade should be addressed as a national priority. October says illegal imports and illicit trading are key drivers of deindustrialization, which ultimately undermine economic growth. The South African economy has lost nearly $1.7 million due to illicit trade in tobacco and alcohol alone. Speaking at the official launch of the second Transitional Alliance to Combat Illicit Trade report, October says formalizing the township economy is also key.
People thought informal sector is good and so on. And when we tried to regulate the spaza shops 10, 15 years ago, there was an outcry to say, how can you deregulate small business? You're going to kill small business. And then you had the food safety standards, and you now had re-regulation of the spaza shops.
Energy expert Mohamed Mahdi has urged the South African government to explore alternatives to power generation. This after Electricity and Energy Minister Dr. Hosiyensu Ramokgopa last week announced that government will be investing $3.3 billion into nuclear power generation in an effort to address the country's energy challenges. Mahdi argues that alternatives such as wind and solar power generation, as well as battery storage, are the most efficient ways of addressing South Africa's capacity shortage.
If we had a much larger nuclear program 15 years ago, the country would have reaped enormous benefits. But today, there are cheaper alternatives to power. Solar, wind, and battery energy storage, for example, can provide the kind of power that this country needs.
Counsel for the Democratic Alliance Party in South Africa, Advocate Ismail Jemi, has argued that the targets set out in the Employment Equity Amendment Act are vague. The DA, which is the applicant in the matter, has argued that government's Employment Equity Act is unfair and unconstitutional. Under the Employment Equity Act, private companies will be forced to comply with employment laws when hiring South Africans or risk a penalty. Jemi says while the quotas set out by the government must be achieved within a 5-year period by private companies, government does not set out how.
It's not explained how and how incremental that has to be. It's not explained what target you have to reach in year 1, year 2, etc. That would be a separate ground. It is a separate basis for attack because it is vague already, but that is not an attack we've taken.
China and the U.S. have announced they will hold their first trade talks since President Donald Trump imposed his sweeping tariffs. The U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent will meet China's Vice Premier He Lifeng in Switzerland on Friday. The BBC's Laura Baker reports.
This meeting will be the first high-level interaction between the two superpowers since the Chinese Vice President Han Zheng attended Mr. Trump's inauguration in January. The U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said he looked forward to rebalancing the international economic system to better serve the interests of the U.S. Chinese state media reported that Beijing had decided to engage with the U.S. after fully considering global expectations, the country's interests, and appeals from American businesses.
$1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 605, in Botswana 13 pula 47. Kenya, the dollar is at 128 shilling 346, Zambia 27 kwacha 27. BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is at 5 real 69, Russia 80 rubles 92, India 84 rupee 40, China 7 yuan 21, South Africa $1 is at 18 rand 23. $1 is at 75 pence to the British pound, 88 to the euro. Commodities, gold is at $3,389, platinum at $979 per ounce, the price of Brent crude oil at $62.53 a barrel. That is all for now. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chandruko Ligege.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa.
Right, it's time for our G20 fact of the morning. Did you know that prior to the African Union joining the G20 as a permanent member in 2023, G20 represented 85% of global GDP and 75% of international trade and 2/3 of the world's population. The inclusion of the African Union was particularly significant as it represents 55 member states with a combined GDP of $3 trillion and a population of 1.4 billion people. South Africa becomes the first African nation to host the G20 Summit of World Leaders. And that's our G20 fact this morning.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa, championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability.
45 minutes past 6 Central African time. Reserve Bank Governor Lesetja Kganyago says a secure digital consumer identity is key to reducing fraud and strengthening the resilience of the financial system. He made the remarks at the launch of the 2025 G20 Tech Sprint held under the theme Trust and Integrity, Scalable and Open Finance. Kganyago also highlighted that the safe and trusted exchange of credit data across borders could unlock access to services like real-time credit scoring. Channel Africa business reporter Innocent Simosa has more.
This year's G20 Tech Sprint is placing the spotlight on open finance with an emphasis on scalable technological solutions that enhance trust and integrity in the financial system. South African Reserve Bank Governor Lesetja Kganyago says the initiative aims to discover world-class innovations that can help regulators tackle key global challenges.
The digital identity will enable easier know your customer identification and verification processes, allowing consumers to open accounts, apply for loans, or access government grants without time-consuming paperwork. A secure and verified digital identity for consumers will also decrease the risks of fraud and make the financial system safer.
Meanwhile, Sub-Deputy Governor Mampo Modise highlighted the evolving role of central banks in shaping the future of digital finance.
So basically, our responsibilities as central bank is to maintain financial stability and the safety net of the financial system. And how do we then achieve this objective in the context of fintech, especially striking a balance between promoting innovation, but also guarding against the risk. I think that's why we appreciate such innovation.
But how do we measure the success of these tech sprint initiatives, and what examples are there of real-world impact? Benedict Knowles, head of the BIS Innovation Hub in Hong Kong, weighs in.
So in general, these tech sprints are really a unique opportunity, as he said, to work with the central banks. I don't think there is another tech sprint globally, frankly, where you have the opportunity to work with 63 central banks globally, because the BIS de facto is an international organization of 63 central banks, including the SARB. Secondly, I am very glad to say that this is the first of these tech sprints on the African continent. And this is very important because with tech sprints, you tend to get applicants from the local ecosystem as well as the global ecosystem. But for example, last year was Brazil, so we had a lot of applicants from LATAM. The year before was India. We had a lot of applicants from India.
As the global regulators and innovators continue to collaborate, the G20 Tech Sprint provides a critical platform to turn bold ideas into practical financial solutions, building a more inclusive and resilient global economy. For Channel Africa News, I am Innocent Samosa in Johannesburg.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa, championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability. Start your day right with Channel Africa Breakfast.
That smells delicious.
Live, 5 days a week.
Cross-border payments across Africa continue to face high fees and delays, and this is largely due to their reliance on foreign banking systems. This is according to payments company Onafrique, which states that this inefficiency costs the continent billions each year. In response, Onafrique has partnered with US-based stablecoin issuer Circle to pilot blockchain-based solutions. Channel Africa's Lebohang Mabange unpacks what the partnership involves and what it could mean for Africa's evolving financial systems.
Each year, African countries lose an estimated $5 billion in transaction fees due to the complex routing of cross-border payments. Most of these payments are settled in foreign currencies like the US dollar and euro, a process that many experts say undermines regional economic integration. Onafrique, which connects over 500 digital wallets and 200 million bank accounts across 40 African markets, says it's now testing blockchain-based settlement using the USDC stablecoin issued by Circle. Luke Kyohere, Group Chief Product and Innovation Officer at Onafrique, explains how the company believes this approach could lower transaction costs.
Integrating USDC onto Onafrique's network will result in reduced transaction fees in a number of ways. First of all, the movement of USDC between different parties on the blockchain is way more affordable than the cost of moving cash across borders. So when we enable partners to fund their transactions via USDC, or when they elect to be settled via USDC, there are a lot of intermediaries that are removed and a lot of additional costs that are removed.
Onafrique operates in multiple jurisdictions, many of which have strict financial regulations. The company says it's engaging with regulators as it rolls out the pilot.
As you understand, we are a company that operates in a very regulated space, and the partners we work with, be them banks or mobile network operators or remittance companies themselves, operate in very regulated spaces. So we are taking a very cautious approach with regard to regulation, and where we hold our licenses, which is in Mauritius and Europe and a few other places, we have consulted or are consulting the regulators to make sure that nothing we do contravenes regulation. And when we enable these services, they're going to be done in a way that doesn't contravene regulation and doesn't affect our partners.
The company also believes that Africa's familiarity with mobile money could make stablecoins easier to adopt. But these are Onafrique's views, and not all financial experts are convinced.
We are seeing a lot more savvy users with regards to just blockchain in general. And then the fact that stablecoins are really tied to various fiat currencies means that they're much easier to wrap their head around. A digital dollar might be something folks are already used to. And in Africa especially, we are used to e-money already because of the mobile money systems that we've come to know very well. So these things are a lot more, stablecoins are a lot more easier for folks to understand for that reason.
As blockchain-based solutions continue to evolve, regulators, banks and users across Africa will be watching closely. The success of this pilot may depend not just on technology, but on trust, oversight and local economic realities. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebohang Mabange.
Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney has directly told US President Donald Trump that Canada was not for sale and would never be for sale. He made the remarks sitting alongside Trump in the Oval Office at the White House, their first face-to-face after Carney's comeback victory in last week's federal election, in which he rode a wave of anti-Trump sentiment that allowed his Liberal Party to defeat the Conservatives, who were the early favorites to sweep to a decisive political win. President Trump has angered Canadians, once viewed as amongst the USA's closest allies, with the imposition of tariffs and his rhetoric about annexing Canada as the US's 51st state. Showen Bryce-Peace reports.
The context for Tuesday's much-anticipated White House meeting comes from comments like these from the two leaders. First, President Trump, followed by Prime Minister Carney.
Why would we pay $200 billion a year in subsidies to Canada when they're not a state? You do that for a state, but you don't do that for somebody else's country. So I think Canada is going to be a very serious contender to be our 51st state.
It is true that President Trump has betrayed Canada. He's betrayed Canada. And he has ruptured the global economy. Our old relationship with the United States is over, unfortunately. And America's leadership of the global economy is over. And this is a tragedy. This is still in play, but it is a tragedy. It is also our new reality. We have to recognize it.
Fast forward to Tuesday's warm welcome at the White House, all smiles for the gathered media, and immediately into what has fast become a custom since Trump's return to the White House, an encounter in the Oval Office in front of the world's press.
It's a great honor to have Prime Minister Mark Carney with us. As you know, just a few days ago, he won a very big election in Canada. And I think I was probably the greatest thing that happened to him, but I can't take vote credit. His party was losing by a lot, and he ended up winning. So I really want to congratulate him. It was probably one of the greatest comebacks in the history of politics, maybe even greater than mine.
Carney called Trump a transformational president for his relentless focus on the economy and the American worker, arguing that he too was elected to transform Canada with a similar focus, as questions quickly turned to Trump's comments about making Canada the 51st state.
Well, I still believe that, but you know, it takes two to tango, right? But no, I do. I mean, I believe it would be a massive tax cut for the Canadian citizens. You get free military, you get tremendous medical cares and other things. There would be a lot of advantages, but it would be a massive tax cut. And it's also a beautiful, you know, as a real estate developer, you know, I'm a real estate developer at heart. When you get rid of that artificially drawn line, somebody drew that line many years ago with like a ruler, just a straight line right across the top of the country. When you look at that beautiful formation when it's together, I'm a very artistic person, but when I looked at that beauty, I said, that's the way it was meant to be. But, you know, I do feel it's much better for Canada. But we're not going to be discussing that unless somebody wants to discuss it.
The Canadian Prime Minister then weighed in, emphatically so.
As you know from real estate, there are some places that are never for sale.
That's true.
We're sitting in one right now, you know, Buckingham Palace, that you visited as well.
That's true.
And having met with the owners of Canada over the course of the campaign last several months, it's not for sale, won't be for sale ever. But the opportunity is in the partnership and what we can build together. And we have done that in the past. And part of that, as the President just said, is with respect to our own security. And my government is committed for a step change in our investment in Canadian security and our partnership. And I'll say this as well, that the President has revitalized international security, revitalized NATO, and us playing our full weight in NATO, and that will be part of it.
True.
Trump also indicated that there was nothing Carney could say to him in their meeting that would see U.S. tariffs on Canada lifted.
No.
Why not?
Just the way it is.
As Carney sought to address the broader economic relationship.
Canadians' view on this is not going to change on the 51st state. Secondly, we are the largest client of the United States in the totality of all the goods. So we are the largest client of the United States. We have a tremendous auto sector between the two of us, and the changes that made have been helpful. 50% of a car that comes from Canada is American. That's not like anywhere else in the world. And to your question about is there one thing? No, this is a bigger discussion. There are much bigger forces involved, and this will take some time and some discussions, and that's why we're here.
A tense relationship, but a meeting that didn't go completely off the rails. There was a clear shift in tone from both leaders in their joint appearance, but the public session in front of the media did not unravel, as did the meeting between President Trump and Ukraine's leader Volodymyr Zelensky in late February. But there are major sticking points between the two sides on tariffs and the future of their $750 billion annual trading relationship, with countries around the world watching closely for any clues that might benefit them in their future dealings with the United States. I am Sherman Bryce-Pease in New York.
Seven o'clock Central Africa time. Asanda, Beda.
Good morning, and thank you everybody for staying with us. If you've just joined us, thank you for doing that as well as we enter the second hour of Africa Rise and Shine.
Yeah, indeed it is. It's 8 o'clock in the morning in Kenya, and in Senegal it is 6 a.m. They've just started their day. And Central Africa time, of course, 7 o'clock. And we have quite a lot that we're looking at in this next hour. But
yeah, we
just
start
a
with
reminder,
the Constitutional Court ruling that Section 6.1 of the South African Citizenship Act of 1995 is unconstitutional and it must be scrapped. We'll find out why they say that. And then the UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, sounds the alarm over a sharp rise in Sudanese refugees fleeing into eastern Chad. We'll have a chat on that one with the global spokesperson from the UNHCR. And then, of course, more will be coming. Not just those two things. We'll be covering a whole lot in this next hour. But it's 7 o'clock, time for news with Onele Nzinzi. And then we'll have headlines, sports-wise, with Musubudi Makura.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Sudan's military government has cut diplomatic ties with the United Arab Emirates and declared it an aggressor state. The Sudanese Defense Minister Yassin Ibrahim accused the UAE of violating Sudan's sovereignty through what he called its proxy, which is the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. The RSF have been fighting a civil war against the army for 2 years. Ibrahim outlined the new measures during a media briefing.
ظل السودان بأثره يتابع ولأكثر من عامين.
Following the continued aggression, the Security and Defence Council decided, first, declaring the United Arab Emirates a hostile state, second, severing diplomatic relations with it, third and finally, withdrawing the Sudanese embassy and general consulate.
Meanwhile, the African Union has strongly condemned Sunday's attack on Port Sudan. It says the attack represents a dangerous escalation in the ongoing conflict and a direct threat to the lives of civilians, humanitarian access and regional stability. The paramilitary Rapid Support Forces launched a drone attack which struck a military airport in the city of Port Sudan. This marks the first time the RSF attacks have reached the city, the de facto capital of Sudan's military-led government, since the conflict between the warring factions erupted 2 years ago. No injuries had been reported, but the attack had caused limited damage. The RSF has not commented on the incident. South Africans lost their citizenship due to Section 6.1 of the Citizenship Act of 1995 will now be recognized as citizens again. This follows a Constitutional Court judgment declaring the section unconstitutional. The Act previously stated that South Africans would lose their citizenship if they voluntarily acquired another nationality, unless they had applied for and received permission to retain it from the Minister of Home Affairs. Justice Stephen Majid delivered the ruling at the Constitutional Court in Braamfontein yesterday.
The court makes the following order. 1. The order of constitutional invalidity of the Supreme Court of Appeal is confirmed. 2. It is declared that Section 6.1a of the South African Citizenship Act 88 of 1995 is inconsistent with the Constitution and is invalid from its promulgation on 6 October 1995. 3. It is further declared that those citizens who lost their citizenship by operation of Section 6.1a of the South African Citizenship Act 88 of 1995 are deemed not to have lost their citizenship.
The Border Management Authority of South Africa says drones that have been deployed to boost border security at various ports of entry across the country are playing a major role in assisting to clamp down on human trafficking syndicates. More than 100 human trafficking facilitators were arrested using the drone footage over the last 2 weeks. The Commissioner of the Border Management Authority, Michael Masiapato, says the drones allowed response teams to operate more efficiently along key vulnerable segments of the country's land border line. He was speaking during the Africa Border Security Week gathering in Cape Town.
The drones were able to enable us to arrest around 112 facilitators. And these are the individuals that had been causing a lot of illegal migration into the country from our neighboring countries, particularly from Zimbabwe, from Lesotho, as well as Mozambique. So on that basis, all of those facilitators, as we arrested, we basically brought them into the country. We opened a case against them for aiding and abetting in the respective police stations. And as we speak, they're facing the might of the law according to Section 49(2) of the Immigration Act.
Lastly, 16 people have been arrested and 3 million pills containing fentanyl have been found in what officials say was one of the largest ever drug operations in the United States. At a news conference in Washington yesterday, the U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi described the operation as a significant victory in the fight against drug trafficking.
This multi-agency operation targeted one of the largest and most dangerous drug trafficking and foreign terrorist organizations in our country. The DEA seized 11.5 kilos of fentanyl, including an astounding approximately 3 million fentanyl pills.
For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us at +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News, I am Onele Ntsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, South Africa thrashed Sierra Leone 4-1 in a CAF Under-20 AFCON tournament to better their chances of qualifying for the knockout stages, while South Africa's women's side opt to field first against India in the ODI Tri-Series. Details of these and other stories coming up at 7:30.
Start your day informed, inspired, and entertained. Asanda and Peter bring you Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time.
Now, the African Union Commission has officially launched the Comprehensive African Agricultural Programme, the CAADP, or CAADP, Strategy and Action Plan 2026 to 2035 in Johannesburg, South Africa. This declaration is crucial as it sets the stage for the ambitious plan aiming to transform Africa's food systems, mobilize $100 billion, boost output by 45%, and triple intra-African trade, as well as halving post-harvest losses. Our reporter Sisi Sechalo attended the second day of the launch and filed this report.
The Comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Programme, CAADP, has been the driving force behind Africa's agricultural transformation since its adoption in 2003 in Maputo, Mozambique. The Maputo CAADP framework aimed to accelerate economic growth, reduce poverty, and enhance food security through agriculture-led growth, targeting a 6% annual agricultural GDP growth by 2015 and at least 10% of public expenditures spent on agriculture. Despite various processes since 2003, no country was on track to meet the Malabo CAADP goals and targets by 2025. In 2024, the African Union Assembly voiced concerns about the continent's slow progress, along with emerging threats to African agri-food systems, and called for the development of a post-Malabo CAADP agenda. The launch in South Africa is expected to benefit the continent at large. Director for Food Agriculture and Natural Resources at SADC Secretariat, Domingos Govi, explains why the launch of the strategy is important to the Southern African Development Community region.
It is a very important event, first because this is the Comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program. that has been approved by the head of states in January 2025, and is following the Maputo, the Malabo, and now the Kampala process. And as you know, agriculture is the cornerstone of the development in our SADC region, and having the Pan-African process being launched is very critical because as a region we have to align ourselves to that process, and we cascade down to the member states so that we transform agriculture, reduce poverty, secure sustainable economic development of our region and countries.
Minister of Agriculture from Eswatini, Mandla Fanachauka, was also part of the launch. He also hailed the event as being important for Africa. Chauka says he's hoping it will change the status quo in terms of agriculture in his country.
We are still grappling with the issues of food security. We have not been able to feed our nation 100% with food produced locally, which we call food sovereignty. We rely quite extensively on imports for us to be able to feed our populations. We would like to change that. Secondly, we want to make sure that poverty is eradicated in the country, and agriculture is a starting point for poverty alleviation in the sense that it creates downstream industries and therefore create a lot of employment. Thirdly, we would like to make sure that what we call vulnerable communities, like our women, youth, and maybe disabled people, are able to be put into the mainstream of agricultural production and economic development. As Africa, I think it's very important for us to also attain food sovereignty as a continent. Firstly, as a continent, and then secondly, as continental blocks. If you look at Southern Africa, for instance, we should be able to produce enough food within that block so that we are able to exchange it among ourselves as countries.
Delegates were encouraged to go and ensure the implementation of the CAADP strategy and Action Plan 2026 to 2035 to the benefit of agriculture development in the African continent. For Channel Africa, I'm Sisi Sikhalo in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Bringing you the energy, news, and good vibes to kickstart your day. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
The Constitutional Court has ruled that Section 6.1 of the South African Citizenship Act of 1995 is unconstitutional and must be scrapped. The section stipulates that South Africans automatically lose their citizenship if they voluntarily acquire another nationality unless they apply for and receive permission to retain it from the Minister of Home Affairs. Delivering the ruling, Justice Stephen Majid said the provision should be invalidated retroactively from the date the Act was promulgated on 6 October 1995. The Supreme Court of Appeal had previously found the section to be unconstitutional, but the Constitutional Court needed to confirm that judgment. Refilwe Mekoa has more.
South Africans who lost their citizenships due to Section 6(1)(a) of the Citizenship Act of 1995 will be recognized as citizens again. This follows a Constitutional Court judgment that Section 6(1) of the Citizenship Act of 1995 is unconstitutional. Justice Stephen Majid delivered the ruling at the Apex Court in Braamfontein, Johannesburg, on Tuesday afternoon.
The court makes the following order. 1. The order of constitutional invalidity of the Supreme Court of Appeal is confirmed. 2. It is declared that Section 6(1)(a) of the South African Citizenship Act 88 of 1995 is inconsistent with the Constitution and is invalid from its promulgation on 6 October 1995. 3. It is further declared that those citizens who lost their citizenship by operation of Section 6(1)(a) of the South African Citizenship Act 88 of 1995 are deemed not to have lost their citizenship.
Justice Majid further indicated that the act infringed on their right to citizenship.
The court holds that the impugned provision is unconstitutional as it infringes the right to citizenship entrenched in Section 20 of the Constitution, and consequentially other constitutional rights, namely political rights, the right to enter and remain in South Africa, and the right to freedom of trade, occupation and profession. The impugned provision must therefore be struck down. The declaration of invalidity should therefore take effect from the date of the Act's promulgation on 6 October 1995.
The Democratic Alliance, who made the application about 10 years ago, welcomed the judgment. The DA's Vili Okamp explains.
This has been a culmination of 10 years of legal battles from the Democratic Alliance side, where we had to take the previous ministers of Home Affairs to court. The most recent was the previous Minister of Home Affairs, Minister Aaron Motsoaledi, who bluntly refused to listen to what the DA has to say. The previous ministers took it through all the ranks of the courts, to the Supreme Court, to the Supreme Court of Appeal, just to now today, after 10 years, finally to get surety for people living outside of South Africa or people who lost their citizenship.
The DA says the ruling is a huge victory for South African citizens. I'm Refile Mekwa in Johannesburg.
Well, to unpack the ruling and what it means for South Africans living abroad, we're now joined by Ludre Stevens, who's the leader of the Democratic Alliance Abroad, and he holds dual South African and UK citizenship and was personally involved in this case. Thanks so much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Thank you and good morning.
So you must be elated in terms of this judgment by the Constitutional Court. It sounds like it's been a long battle.
Absolutely. So I was in the room 11 years ago when we decided to take up this cause as South Africans overseas as part of the DA abroad. It was quite special to be in the room yesterday when the judge said all the people who've lost their citizenship since 1995 gets it back automatically. I can't tell you how many emails and phone calls we've had over the last 10 years of people saying, we're stuck, what do we do now, where from here, how do we escalate? So it was quite emotional, if I'm honest. It's been an 11-year journey, and I didn't expect the judge to be this direct and this brutal in saying it's just back. Not go back to Parliament, rewrite the law, because reconsider it, is they have it back. No ifs, no buts. It's very special.
So take us back then to when you first realized what had happened to you. Was it a complete surprise? Did it come as a shock?
Well, so luckily for me, as part of the DA abroad, I had visibility of these things happening. So the process is this. You have to apply for a retention letter to have kept your South African citizenship. And if you didn't do this admin process, you just lost it automatically. But then there's two things wrong with this. Number one is no one ever gets denied this retention letter. So it's a completely superfluous process that you don't need to do. And number two, no one knows about this process. Who knows you have to do that? And so what will happen is people will arrive back in South Africa at the airport, and then they say, oh, but I'm sorry, you have a second passport. Where's your retention letter? And if you don't have it, you can't enter as a South African, and you're only allowed to be here for 90 days. Or people pitch up to the embassy in London, South African parents, to register the new baby, and they say, sorry, you can't. You're no longer South African, so you can't register your child as South African. And so I've been part of the DA abroad for 15 years now, and we were sitting in London, and we get these phone calls of people that are distraught. And there's literally nothing we can do, because at that point to navigate the previous Home Affairs and the assistance from Home Affairs ministers were just not forthcoming. So we then took this cause up with the DA back in SA, and they then helped us to go through parliamentary processes, engage with the minister. And I mean, what was so frustrating that is we were being blocked at every point by the previous Minister of Home Affairs. But I can't tell you how many heartbreaking stories we've heard of the last 10 years. So I was quite lucky that I learned from other people's heartbreak to make sure, get this retention letter. And let me tell you, that letter wasn't easy to get. You had to make an appointment with the embassy. You had to pay them £100, 2,000 Rand. Then it takes 8 months to get a letter. If you get a letter, it doesn't get lost in the post. It was just a ridiculous process. Absolutely ridiculous.
So what does this now mean for South Africans living abroad that lost their citizenship because of this retention letter?
So the effect of it is you have it back now automatically. So when you want to come back to SA, to move back, to see your family, to come work. They can't stop you at the border anymore and say, oh, show us this random retention letter. It also just means people have this comfort and knowing that your birthright is not being impacted by the silly admin process. But ultimately, it just takes away all the heartbreak. Grandparents who live overseas can come back to their grandkids now. People can go overseas and do their 2 years, 5 years, 10 years studying, working, getting life experience, and come back and not have to worry about losing their identity in that sense. And so it's just making life normal. And the judge also said yesterday, so they brought in a specialist to talk about what is the trend in the world of having dual nationality or single nationality. And he said they brought in an expert, a friend of the court, who did a big overview for them. And the norm these days is to allow for dual nationality because we all live now in a more globalized world, a more traveled world. And so it's an exception to have single nationality regulations only, and it's the norm to have dual nationality. So not only does this obviously give people, which are about 2 million estimated South Africans living overseas, that freedom to get the skills, get the experience. It also means South Africa is a country on the world stage. Our citizens can travel and be integrated and be part of the international economy without being put at risk by some random minister discretion.
So what's the process now? I believe Department of Home Affairs is setting up an online portal to help people have their citizenship reinstated. Given your experiences, how hopeful are you that this will work? Is there a better way, different way? What are your thoughts?
Yes, I must say, I'm really very impressed that the new Minister of Home Affairs, Dr. Leon Schreiber, came out yesterday, all guns blazing, saying, we hear you, we're going to fix this, and not with the normal responses such as, oh, we'll get back to you in due course with how to do it. They came out to say they're preparing right now an online portal where people can go check their status and obviously look at any actions that may be needed, and that they will be providing assistance. And so this is in stark contrast to the previous Ministers of Home Affairs. They would just put up blocks left, right, and center. The great thing about this verdict is that you have it back, right? It's not like, oh, they're going to change the law to make provision for it and regulations. The judge said yesterday, you have it back. And so I think anybody with immediate concerns, that gives them that immediate comfort. But one of the things that the new Minister of Home Affairs is doing is bringing Home Affairs into 21st century, digital online services, getting rid of backlogs. And so it is really encouraging. And to be honest, I wouldn't have thought a year ago we'd have this quick a response for Home Affairs ever, so it's very encouraging.
All right, so what's your advice to South Africans living abroad who took up citizenship of new countries? Does this mean that it doesn't matter when you took up the citizenship in your other state, you are now able to get a South African passport back, even if you weren't even thinking about it? It's your right.
Exactly. So the short answer is it is your right. You can claim it back. But obviously we have to just bear in mind these things are a little bit nuanced. There are a handful of countries that only allow you to have single nationality. And there are a handful of countries that the other country requires you to get permission on their side to hold two nationalities. So we have put out a statement ourselves as a DA abroad, and I think the minister is doing shortly as well, to say, in those cases where you don't want to get back, so for example, the Netherlands is a case in point. They only allow you to have a Dutch citizenship. And so people relied on this process to lose their SA citizenship. And so in those cases, they need to go through an opt-out process. And so, but that is really the exception over here. My advice would be is that obviously if you have urgent travels, reach out to the Home Affairs Department to see if you have any worries. But if you have medium-term plans, just wait for the portal to go live. I'm pretty confident it's going to be in short order, as this minister and his newly well-run Home Affairs Department turns around things really quickly. But the main thing is, you can now rest assured, the judge said unequivocally, there's no higher court than this court. This judge said, if you lost it since 1995 because of this clause, you now have it back. No ifs, no buts, no nothing.
Okay, Ludra, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much indeed for sharing your journey with us and this story and its significance. Thanks for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. That's Ludra Stevens, who's the head of, the leader of the DA abroad, speaking to us about this constitutional court ruling in South Africa, saying that you cannot lose your South African citizenship because you didn't apply for a retention letter. All right. That's where we'll leave that.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
Let's move to Ghana now, where opposition parties there have condemned the decision by the president to suspend the country's Chief Justice and are demanding that she be reinstated with immediate effect. Gertrude Tokonu has been removed from her post pending investigations into her conduct, the first time a Chief Justice has been suspended in Ghana's history. Opposition parties are accusing President John Mahama of violating the constitution by failing to follow due process and say he is interfering in the independence of the judiciary. They held a protest against the decision. More from Ghanaian politician and member of the New Patriotic Party, Vincent Eko Asafua.
Thousands of Ghanaians who believe in a constitutional supremacy rather than an executive supremacy gathered around in the Supreme Court of Ghana, Parliament House, and ultimately proceeded to the Jubilee House. That is the seat of the president. The reason was very simple, that Ghana, as a republic, practices a constitutional supremacy, and in that constitutional supremacy is the sovereignty of the three arms of government. That three arms of government, I understand, plays a bit of a checks and balances in a way, but the authority is sacrosanct in the Constitution of the Republic, and no other arm of government can unilaterally, whimsically, capriciously remove another arm of government without following due procedure. It is on that basis that the processes that have been triggered to remove the Chief Justice of the Republic of Ghana, who has currently been suspended, to my estimation of the law, and to my understanding of the law, is unconstitutional, should not be allowed to stand, and cannot stand. It is an assault to our democracy. It is an assault to the integrity of the framers of the 1992 Constitution. It is an assault to the history of this country, where we have protected all arms of government without overreaching the other. Essentially, the president has, over the years, time past, with the support of some of the party people, have indicated that when given the opportunity, they will claim the judiciary from partisan manipulation in their own words. It seems to me that they are only acting or working their talk before they won an election. We've had the chairman of the current governing party, the NDC, having cause to say that the Chief Justice and the Electoral Commissioner should not be allowed to stay in office. We've had appointees at the presidency, the Deputy Operations Director at the presidency, claiming that the Chief Justice and the Electoral Commissioner should not be allowed to stay. These are things that they said before they won election, and they have repeated it even after they won election. Putting this and pieces together, I have no doubt in my mind that this is a political witch hunt against the Chief Justice, who they claim that he is in bed with the New Patriotic Party. Allegations that they are basing on to remove the Chief Justice is as baseless as nothing. And I have taken the fight to make sure that we protect the sanctity of our judiciary. We protect the tenets of our Constitution. Which Constitution is supreme above any other person.
Now, in this case, the protesters are alleging that the president did not follow proper procedures. In your view, what was the president supposed to do in this instance when he was not satisfied with the Chief Justice?
The president, in accordance with Article 146, ought to have delivered a petition to the Chief Justice. The petition that seeks to remove the Chief Justice was not forwarded to the Chief Justice. For the Chief Justice to be moved or otherwise. It was only after I filed a writ at the Supreme Court saying that there has been a procedural breach because the Chief Justice ought to have been listened to before any commencement of the removal of the Chief Justice was done. Now, it was after that the Chief Justice was now asked to respond to the petition. It is my respective opinion that there is a procedural breach. And for that matter, the commencement that sought to remove the Chief Justice is ultra-violent. It's null and void. It's unconstitutional. It cannot be allowed to stand. And I am praying the court to hear my argument that the power of the judiciary is a powerful position. It's a powerful position to the extent that it cannot be removed on flimsy, frivolous, vexatious claims or allegations against the Chief Justice. It will have to be very clear before you can take up the Chief Justice. In the absence of that, whatever is happening in Ghana now, as far as the President of the Republic of Ghana is concerned, it is a political witch hunting.
Now, what is your appeal to the President? What would you like to see happen now?
We expect the President to see in what we are saying, to protect the sanctity of the judiciary. Today, as we speak, the executive arm of government and the legislative arm of government, which are on the right, seem to have lost a bit of integrity. The only institution that we have left, I must say, is the judiciary. It's unfortunate that the President wants to politicize that institution. In doing so, it can break down our democracy. I hope that it doesn't happen. And if the President is able to listen to wise counsel, they will not get there. So I am hoping that the President will listen to wise counsel and know that the Chief Justice is our government with the same authority like him. And so we should tread cautiously in the decisions that we make about another arm of government.
That was Ghanaian politician and member of the New Patriotic Party, Vincent Ikao Asafua. He was speaking to Channel Africa's Nhlanhla Mahlangu. On Africa Rise and Shine on Channel Africa in general, find us on our various social media platforms. That's X. We are on Instagram. We are on TikTok. Our handles there are at Channel Africa 1. And you can also find us on Facebook. We are Channel Africa there. Love to hear your views. At 31 minutes past 7 Central African time, let's say good morning for our news headlines with Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Sudan's military government has cut diplomatic ties with the United Arab Emirates and declared it an aggressor state. The Sudanese Defense Minister Yassin Ibrahim accused the UAE of violating Sudan's sovereignty through what he called its proxy, the paramilitary rapid support forces. South Africans who lost their citizenship due to Section 6(1) of the Citizenship Act of 1995 will now be recognized as citizens again. This follows a Constitutional Court judgment declaring the section unconstitutional. And the United Nations Secretary General has expressed his concern about Indian military operations against Pakistan, reiterating his call for maximum restraint from both countries. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Right, it's time for us to take a look and see what's been happening in the world of sport. And Musibudi Makura is at the desk this morning. Top of the morning to you, Musibudi.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. We'll start here. So South Africa showcased their attacking prowess with a commanding 4-1 win over Sierra Leone in a Total Energies CAF Under-20 Africa Cup of Nations tie on Tuesday evening in Ismailia. The match commenced with South Africa asserting early dominance as they look to grab the early lead. Jody Ashene opened the scoring in the 13th minute with a precise right-footed shot from outside the box following a well-timed assist from Shakira Akil April. So despite Sierra Leone's efforts to respond, the first half concluded with South Africa leading 1-0, who were much more disciplined in their defence. The second half saw Amajita intensify their offensive efforts. Now Rapo doubled the lead on the hour mark. Sierra Leone then managed to reduce a deficit in the 69th minute when Mo Kamara found the back of the net after a cross from Osman Kamara in goal that brought back confidence to the Sierra Leone side. However, South Africa regained control when substitute Thabang Mahlangu making a significant impact. Mahlangu netted twice in quick succession, first in the 85th minute and then again in the 89th minute. The victory putting South Africa second behind Sierra Leone, who remain top of Group A despite that disappointing loss to the South African side, putting also Amajita in a good position of qualifying for the quarterfinals of this year's competition. Further field now, Inter Milan produced a dramatic late turnaround to beat Barcelona 7-6 on aggregate in a thrilling all-time classic of a Champions League semi-final. It means a second Champions League final in 3 seasons for the 3-time European champions Inter Milan after 2 legs of incredible drama that saw 13 goals and a tie turned on its head on several occasions. Now, Barcelona head coach Hansi Flick expressed mixed emotions as his side were dumped out of the competition at the semi-final stage. The second leg at the Giuseppe Meazza mirrored the first with a 3-3 draw at half-time. However, David Frasetti scored a beauty in extra time to send Inter Milan to their final, winning 7-6 on aggregate. Now, the German tactician expressed his disappointment in the outcome but also praised his team for their effort on the night.
I know that everyone is disappointed, but we could be disappointed while we're out, because we invested a lot of this match and came back again, and I think some decisions were 50-50 always for Inter, but it's like that, and we have to accept it. It's football, and at the end, but we can be proud about our performance, and this was really, I'm proud. I'm proud of my team.
On to tennis news now. 2-time Wimbledon champion Petra Kvitova won her first match since the birth of her first child, then said that she had been close to quitting tennis. The Czech player claimed a 7-5, 6-1 win over Romania's Irina Camelia Begu in the first round of the Italian Open in Rome yesterday. A victory ended a run of 4 defeats since the 35-year-old returned to competitive action after 15 months away, during which she gave birth to a son, Petra. Now, Kvitova, who won Wimbledon back in 2011 as well as 2014 and reached number 2 in the world, said that she had doubted whether she would be able to return to the international arena. Meanwhile, speaking after the win, she said she's satisfied with her performance.
I'm glad I got a win finally.
Yes.
It took a while. I had some chances even before in some of the matches, but getting the win, I think, is the big relief, I would say. I was, too much focusing on it, so I'm glad it's there. I'm done with it, so I can just go forward and see what the future brings. But I'm very happy how I managed it today. As you mentioned, I was feeling the same on the court, actually, trying, saving those break points, and
Meanwhile, defending Rome Open champion Alexander Zverev said he's now on a good path, putting a poor run of form following his defeat in the Australian Open down to burnout. The 28-year-old world number 2 put an end to the dry run, which included opening defeats in the Indian Wales competition as well as the Monte Carlo Masters by winning the ATP title in Munich in mid-April. The German, who's still seeking his first Grand Slam title, said he should, in retrospect, have taken time off after losing to Jannik Sinner in straight sets in the Australian Open final in January of this year. And finally, South Africa won the toss earlier and elected to field first in the Tri-Series one-day international match against India in Colombo at the International Cricket Stadium. Now, South Africa, who go into this tie without their captain Ndoro Volfaart, find themselves in a must-win situation after losing their first 2 matches of the series. Their only path now into the final is back-to-back wins. However, their job is now is made much much more harder because Wolfart, who has been their mainstay player, has been sidelined due to illness, so they will be missing an experienced batter at the top of the batting table. They haven't had a good record against India. They have also lost 4 of their 5 matches they've played against them. That's a wrap from the sports desk at the Sawa. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Africa. It's time to plug into the heartbeat of the continent. Tune in to Channel Africa, your go-to radio station that broadcasts in 5 different languages.
L'Afrique du Sud célèbre la journée nationale du
Kabla hujaitwa kwa jina la Double K
or more of our forests have been destroyed.
Partido Africano da Independência da Guiné.
See, Channel Africa represents every corner of this amazing land. From Lagos to Cape Town, Nairobi to Dakar, we've got you covered with the freshest news, music, and cultures. So, turn up the volume, feel the rhythm. And join the conversation. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Let's find out what's happening in the world of business. Here's Chanduko Lugege with your latest economics news.
Business news on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. South African Reserve Bank Governor Lesetja Kganyago says a secure digital consumer identity is key to reducing fraud and strengthening the resilience of the financial system. He made the remarks at the launch of the 2025 G20 Tech Sprint held under the theme Trust and Integrity, Scalable and Open Finance. Kganyago also highlighted that the safe and trusted exchange of credit data across borders could unlock access to services like real-time credit scoring. Innocent Samosa has more.
This year's G20 Tech Sprint is placing the spotlight on open finance with an emphasis on scalable technological solutions that enhance trust and integrity in the financial system. South African Reserve Bank Governor Lesetja Kganyago says the initiative aims to discover world-class innovations that can help regulators tackle key global challenges.
Nigeria has approved a $652 million China Exim Bank funding package for construction of a road to move goods from a seaport and petroleum refinery on the edge of its main city, Lagos, to its southern states. The financing was approved by the Federal Executive Council, chaired by President Bola Tinubu on Monday. The road will be an evacuation corridor from the Lekki Deep Sea Port, the Dangote Petroleum Refinery, Africa's biggest, with refining capacity of 650,000 barrels per day, and its adjoining fertilizer plant to at least a dozen southern states. The Namibia Statistics Agency, NSA, is currently conducting the 2025-26 Namibia Household Income and Expenditure Survey, a data collection exercise aimed at providing current information for national development planning. This will be the 5th household income and expenditure survey conducted, serving as the primary source of household income and expenditure data, crucial for calculating poverty and inequality indicators in Namibia. Statistician General and CEO at the Namibia Statistics Agency, Alex Shimuafeni.
Now, the primary objective is to collect detailed information on income as well as on spending patterns of households across the country. And here I'm referring to households because as a statistics agency, we normally do household-based surveys. Now, the data is very essential for measuring poverty levels in the country. We need to assess the living standards of people in the country.
South Africa and Botswana have signed a new agreement aimed at addressing Botswana's ongoing power shortages. This emerged during a recent meeting between South African President Cyril Ramaphosa and his counterpart Duma Boko in Johannesburg. Botswana has been struggling with intermittent power supply disruptions, leading to increased reliance on imports from neighboring countries. Boko has described the latest agreements as durable and meaningful.
We have now an agreement that we've just concluded in relation to addressing power shortages in Botswana and having a more durable, more meaningful arrangement that departs from what we've had before, which was to buy at emergency prices. Now we've settled it at a reasonable scale, and we will improve our power situation that side in collaboration with South Africa.
China and the United States have announced they will hold their first trade talks since President Donald Trump imposed his sweeping tariffs. The U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent will meet China's Vice Premier He Linfeng in Switzerland on Friday. The BBC's Laura Pica reports.
This meeting will be the first high-level interaction between the two superpowers since the Chinese Vice President Han Zheng attended Mr. Trump's inauguration in January. The U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said he looked forward to rebalancing the international economic system to better serve the interests of the U.S. Chinese state media reported that Beijing had decided to engage with the US after fully considering global expectations, the country's interests, and appeals from American businesses.
$1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 605. In Botswana, 13 pula 47. Kenya, the dollar is at 128 shilling 346. Zambia, 27 kwacha 27. BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is at 5 real 69. Russia, 80 rubles 92. India, 84 rupee 40. China, 7 yuan 21. South Africa, $1 is at $1 18 rand 23. $1 is trading at 75 pence to the British pound, 88 to the euro. Commodities, gold is at $3,389, platinum at $979 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil, $62.53 a barrel. That is all for now. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Start your day right with Channel Africa Breakfast.
That smells delicious.
Live, 5 days a week.
Now, a leading academic from the University of South Africa has sounded the alarm over the rising unemployment rate among university graduates. Speaking at the Second International Conference on Higher Education, Teaching, Learning and Student Support in Pretoria, Professor Miahabo Mangano from UNISA's Faculty of Education called for urgent action to tackle the lack of job opportunities for graduates. The global gathering of educators, policymakers and students aims to find innovative solutions to transform the future of higher education. Channel Africa's Michael Mbewe reports.
Graduating from university is a major milestone in one's life, often accompanied by a mix of excitement, hope and anxiety. After years of hard work, students step into the world with the expectation that their education will open doors to better opportunities. One of the most common expectations is securing meaningful employment in their chosen field. Graduates often hope that their degree will give them an edge in the job market, enabling them to find stable, well-paying jobs that reflect their skills and qualifications. However, while these expectations are natural and often justified, graduates also face the reality that the transition to the working world can be challenging. Competition, economic factors, and limited opportunities delay some of these goals. Miahabo Mangano is an education professor at UNISA.
It's so painful to complete a BCom degree, but you're looking for a job. Why can't you create one? You are an agriculturist, you have your BSc, but you're looking for a job. Why can't you create one? What is it that we are not doing right in education? You are an IT specialist, you are looking for a job. I think the mind of entrepreneurship, that should be a priority for us as educationists. And the pioneers in the past brought something tangible and practical. The Wright brothers created something that could fly. What are we creating? What are we bringing? Why are we having PhDs that are not solving? Why do we continue to publish and be rated? What are you bringing forth?
Professor Magano is optimistic that the conference will provide solutions to these challenges.
We hope to get maybe a policy brief on how can we transform the space in academia and basic education and look at the education that is relevant and solving our own problems, whether you are in Africa or coming from anywhere in the world, since we have about 16 countries gathered here. I think that should be the bottom line.
The Chief Executive Officer at Council for Higher Education, Dr. Whitfield Green, explains what higher education should do to society.
So I think two issues are important to consider. One is that higher education is much bigger than just producing students who can become workers. Higher education is about building a critical citizen that's able to engage in societal issues and to contribute to the building of society. Having said that, it's equally important for higher education to ensure that its graduates are able to transition successfully into society, and that includes transitioning into the workplaces.
In many instances, higher education is often blamed for not producing graduates with employability skills required in workplaces. A statement dismissed by Dr. Green.
To say that graduate unemployment is a fault of higher education is a simplistic answer. I think in an economy that's struggling, and an economy that's not growing, and in an economy that's not absorbing workers, the expectation that all graduates will be employed is probably a difficult expectation.
To the status quo, what solutions are available to change the education system in Africa?
I also think graduates and entrepreneurship is an important issue. So to build capacity in higher education graduates to think about entrepreneurship opportunities as they progress through their studies and then progress from their studies is also an important element. How can we build African graduates that can actually grow possibilities for themselves and for others rather than just work seekers?
Dr. Kathy Ikror Mbide from Makerere University in Uganda also raised a concern on graduates' unemployment.
It's very exciting for us as higher education institutions to hold on graduation day. 10,000 have graduated. But where are we sending them to? Someone graduates in law, in business, in agriculture, in chemistry, in zoology, but they are looking for a job. I think it is really time we need to rethink of this entire journey, and given the fact that in Africa we are faced with a youth unemployment bulge, so it is affecting us, and these are the future. So we need to really be mindful. We need to change the mechanisms.
She shared some insights on how they are shaping the future of graduates in Uganda.
We are now trying to develop programs targeted to students' areas of specialization. So the lawyers come and try to practice how to register a business and how to make money. If a student is doing their research in agriculture, say them, okay, how are you going to make money out of that? So we are instilling the self-employment skill, the startup skill within the students, within their areas of specialization.
Michael Mbewe, Channel Africa News, Johannesburg.
A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Let's talk the UN Refugee Agency now, or the UNHCR. They're sounding the alarm on a Tuesday over a sharp rise in Sudanese refugees fleeing into eastern Chad, with nearly 20,000 people, mostly exhausted and traumatized women and children, arriving in the past 2 weeks alone. Gedgis, UNHCR's representative in Chad, told a UN briefing in Geneva that the largest influx has been at the Tine border, crossing in Wadi Fira province, where almost 6,000 people arrived within just 2 days. To speak to us about this, we're joined on the line by Eugene Bien, who is UNHCR Global Spokesperson. Eugene, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Can you give us a clearer picture in terms of the current situation at the Tine border crossing and what the UNHCR teams are witnessing on the ground?
So our team at the border of Chad and Sudan is horrifying humanitarian crisis once again unfolding. Since the Sudan, the conflict erupted 2 years ago, that Chad has witnessed of almost 800,000 Sudanese refugees crossing the border. And now that we're seeing much dire situation of Sudanese refugees, mostly women and children crossing the border, completely traumatized because of the violence they witnessed in the Darfur region, and then walking several days without food with their children. We're hearing that a lot of children separated from their family while this chaotic flight to save their life. They just fly, they just escape from the violence without any money, any food. So we are seeing malnourished children, the children at risk, unaccompanied children. This is a crisis of women and children, those vulnerable population.
Let's talk about medical assistance. What are some of the main challenges facing the newly arrived refugees around that? There are some who are reported to have been wounded.
So we have to remember that Chad has been generously hosting a lot of Sudanese refugees even before this crisis 2 years ago. So now the Chad is completely lacking the basic services, and this is the area that not having the luxury of health facility and then other basic services. And then now what we're seeing that we're receiving a lot of wounded from the conflict and violence, and then we are trying our best to transfer to the nearest the transit site, and then the refugee camp already exists, and then a lot of humanitarian actors are working 24 hours, 7 days to support, to provide food and healthcare, but it is not enough. And with the current funding situation, the very severe funding cut that humanitarian actors are experiencing, that a lot of human toll is actually suffered by the vulnerable refugee population.
Yeah, as you say, one wonders how much better Chad is at handling this humanitarian crisis, as it hosts 1.3 million refugees already, and it is one of the poorest countries. Let's talk about the challenges that they are prone to, these women and children, factoring in that they might not even have identification documents on them. What challenge will this pose?
So that's what I'm talking about, generosity of Chad government. Chad government recognized them immediately as refugees. So they don't need to go through the heavy registration process. They can receive the services immediately as soon as they arrive. But then the thing is, as you mentioned, the Chad is one of the poorest countries, and then they cannot do alone this, and they definitely need much more support to host this refugee population, as well as provide the services they need and then they deserve.
So how is the UNHCR working with the Chadian government and other partners as it takes a collaborative effort to respond to this sudden surge in refugee arrivals?
It is definitely the collaborative work with the government, local authority, and host community. We shouldn't forget about the host community who open their home and also share their resources. But as I mentioned, that this is the time that the international community have to show the solidarity, that what our team on the ground is witnessing is a lack of services, lack of humanitarian aid support for this population. So I'm emphasizing again that this is the crisis of women and children. Those vulnerable population need the support. So this is the time that the international community has to step up and then continues to support Chad and then their host community.
Absolutely. Looking ahead, what are the potential implications then? The conflict seems to be continuing, and it's escalating even more than continuing, and more people are forced to flee across the border. What do we predict might happen with the neighboring countries like Chad?
We're talking about 13 million people displaced. The Sudanese, the 13 million Sudanese displaced within in their country or neighboring country. We're talking about 4 million people already displaced and cross the border in neighboring country. What we're seeing that, of course, that a lot of refugees want to stay in neighboring country, waiting that they can return to their peaceful country. So first of all, that for them, that the peace has to return to Sudan so that those population can go back their home. That's what they want. But if they cannot receive the deserved the assistance in neighboring country, and then those desperate refugees can also have to make a very desperate decision to go onward, to make onward journey to further up or even the further to Europe. So where they can find the safety and as well as the basic services they deserve.
And we know there are many, many other challenges laced within that type of a journey as well. But we'll leave it there for today, Eugene. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Eugene Bien is UNHCR Global Spokesperson talking to us on the line there. And that's how we wrap up the second hour of Africa Rise and Shine. Getting into the next third and final hour of the show. If you've just joined us, good morning via live streaming. Peace sign to you. Radio has become TV. You see us. You're not just hearing us. So thank you so much for tuning in to Channel Africa and Rise and Shine, especially coming to you live from our Johannesburg studios. My name is Asanda, Beda.
And I'm Peter Ndoro. Thanks for joining us. Third and final hour. And on Wednesdays, we do something we call a Wednesday profile or feature of somebody who's given his life or her life to making his country or her country, a continent, better in some way. And today we're going to be in conversation with a significant person in South African history, particularly the struggle to democracy and also life of service soon after. We're going to be speaking to General Sipiwe Nyanda, and that's coming up after the news with Onele Nzinzi.
And then we have sports headlines with Musibudi Makura.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Sudan's military government has cut diplomatic ties with the United Arab Emirates and declared it an aggressor state. The Sudanese Defense Minister Yassin Ibrahim accused the UAE of violating Sudan's sovereignty through what he calls its proxy, the Paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. The RSF have been fighting a civil war against the army for 2 years. Ibrahim outlined the new measures during a media conference.
Following the continued aggression, the Security and Defence Council decided, first, declaring the United Arab Emirates a hostile state, second, severing diplomatic relations with it, third and finally, withdrawing the Sudanese embassy and general consulate.
South Africans who lost their citizenship due to Section 6.1 of the Citizenship Act of 1995 will now be recognised as citizens again. This follows a Constitutional Court judgment declaring the section unconstitutional. The Act previously stated that South Africans would lose their citizenship if they voluntarily acquired another nationality, unless they had applied for and received permission to retain it from the Minister of Home Affairs. Justice Stephen Majid delivered the ruling at the Constitutional Court in Braamfontein yesterday.
The court makes the following order. 1. The order of constitutional invalidity of the Supreme Court of Appeal is confirmed. 2. It is declared that Section 6.1a of the South African Citizenship Act 88 of 1995 is inconsistent with the Constitution and is invalid from its promulgation on 6 October 1995. 3. It is further declared that those citizens who lost their citizenship by operation of Section 6.1a of the South African Citizenship Act 88 of 1995 are deemed not to have lost their citizenship.
South Africa's Basic Education Minister Siviwe Gwagube says her department will ensure that the eradication of pit toilets in schools is completed by the end of this financial year. The minister says currently about 96 pit toilets have been completely removed as part of the 2018 backlog project. Kwachobe and her team updated Parliament's Portfolio Committee on the basic education yesterday about the latest developments on school infrastructure challenges.
We announced at the end of the financial year that we are standing at 96% of the pet toilets that have been eradicated, and that only 139 of these projects remain from the 2018 back. Again, just to create a caveat here, that members, it does not mean that there are no pit toilets in South Africa or that only 139 of them exist. It says that from the 2018 backlog or audits that was done, 139 of these projects still exist. And I do also want to assure members that while we may not have met our deadline of the end of the financial year, of the previous financial year, we are working day and night to make sure that we will come and report to you once this backlog has been done and once we've launched a new audit.
The Border Management Authority of South Africa says drones that have been deployed to boost border security at various ports of entry across the country are playing a major role in helping to clamp down on human trafficking syndicates. More than 100 human trafficking facilitators were arrested during the drone footage over the last 2 weeks. Commissioner of the Border Management Authority, Michael Masiapato, says the drones allowed response teams to operate more efficiently along key vulnerable segments of the country's land border line. He was speaking during Africa Border Security Week gathering in Cape Town.
The drones were able to enable us to arrest around 112 facilitators. And these are the individuals that had been causing a lot of illegal migration into the country from our neighboring countries, particularly from Zimbabwe, from Lesotho, as well as Mozambique. So on that basis, all of those facilitators, as we arrested, we basically brought them into the country. We opened a case against them for aiding and abetting in the respective police stations. And as we speak, they're facing the might of the law, according to Section 49(2) of the Immigration Act.
And lastly, the United Nations Secretary General has expressed his concern about the Indian military operations against Pakistan, reiterating his call for maximum restraint from both countries. Antonio Guterres was reacting to the news that India had launched strikes on various sites in Pakistan in the aftermath of an attack on Hindu tourists. India has blamed Pakistan for backing the militants responsible for the April 22 terrorist attack in Indian-administered Kashmir that killed 26 people. Sean Price reports that a number of casualties have been confirmed, including some deaths attributed to the Indian strike.
The Secretary-General says the world could not afford a military confrontation between India and Pakistan after warning a day earlier that a military solution was no solution. Pakistan's foreign ministry called it an unprovoked and blatant act of war, accusing India's air force of violating its sovereignty and the UN Charter. India's defense ministry says it carried out precision strikes targeting terrorist camps in Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Pakistan said it reserved the right to respond appropriately at a time and place of its choosing.
Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, PSG's Ousmane Dembele fit for Champions League second leg tie against Arsenal, and defending Rome champion Alexander Zverev blames burnout on the poor run of form. Details of these and other stories coming up at 8:30.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Right, it's 7 minutes past 8 Central African Time, and on a Wednesday we have a special feature which we call the Wednesday Profile Feature, and it's one that I often look forward to because we get an opportunity to talk to Africans that have contributed to their country and the continent in some way. And today we have a distinguished guest, General Spiwe Nyanda, General retired, whose life journey pretty much mirrors South Africa's tumultuous path from apartheid to democracy. He's a struggle hero with the African National Congress's armed wing, Umkhonto weSizwe. And this positioned him at the forefront of the liberation struggle, and his ascent from guerrilla commander to the chief of the South African National Defence Force, and later to Minister of Communications and High Commissioner to Mozambique, underscores a career that was dedicated and has been dedicated to national service. South African military leader, political activist, diplomat, and former government minister, General Sphiwe Nyanda joins us now. Thank you so much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program. So good to hear your voice again.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks for the flattering introduction.
Well deserved, well deserved. Let's go back in time to your childhood, growing up in Soweto, and I just wonder your early memories of what you were seeing around you that compelled you to join the liberation movement.
You know, perhaps I can take it as at the start of my participation in the liberation movement as an active member. I want to say that because I used to recruit for the African National Congress as a youth, as somebody who worked as a reporter in the World newspaper. And I always want to comment when people ask me about this recruitment into the ANC and Umkhonto weSizwe of South Africans, South African youth to go and join the liberation movement. And I say, actually, I didn't recruit these people. These people were ready. All youths in South Africa at that time, black youths in South Africa, were ready to fight. It's just that they didn't know how to get a vehicle to allow them to fight the repressive apartheid regime. So I had a very easy task then because of the situation, which also affected me from childhood. I remember being dragged by my mom when Bantu education was introduced in South Africa in order to keep black people in their place, and hurried home because people said boycott Bantu education. And there were protests, and they were to be fetched from school. So from childhood, this impacted on me. Every day when I went to school, I used to attend Tula Sizwe, walk to Tula Sizwe primary school, and later on Orlando. I used to see signs on the road, release Mandela, release Mandela Sisulu, lead us. So from childhood, we knew that the leadership of the country was incarcerated in prison for struggling. But of course, the African National Congress at the time that we were growing up was banned. Sharpeville had taken place it took place in 1961. At that time, I was only 11 years old. And it impacted on me. It impacted on all South Africans. Of course, there were jobs that people did, but for a pittance. Youth at that time, those who were not at school, I fortunately went to school, went to primary, went to high school, completed my high school. But even at university, one felt this oppression, because there are things that I could not do. There are professions that I could not go for. There are careers that I could not go for. I could not be a chartered accountant. I could not be an engineer. I could only be a doctor or a lawyer. A few career opportunities were open to us. So we were. And of course, in normal social life, there are places we could not go to. We had our own separate townships with own trains, on rails, and whites could even in railways and in rails where which served both white and black, they had their special coaches. So I think the psychology of apartheid and the practicalities of apartheid at that time impacted on everybody, such that it was almost inevitable. Soweto, when it took place, was inevitable. The uprising in Soweto was inevitable because of the oppressive system that we enjoyed. And when that was, of course, the spark that led to a generalized revolution. The African National Congress had been banned. The Pan-Africanist Pan-Africanist Congress had been banned. The South African Communist Party had long been banned in 1950. So there were very little avenues, and of course, then they emerged a black consciousness when I was at university. And that also impacted on us in a positive way to say that we need to struggle. And then as a journalist also, after my expulsion for political activities at school, I joined the Union of Black Journalists when I was working as a journalist for the World newspaper. So I can say that South Africa had been ripe for revolution. Of course, the repression was a lot. And people were carved, especially those who had taken part in activities of the African National Congress, which was now underground. In fact, had been decimated the organization structures with the arrest of the leaders of the ANC and the exile of many like Oliver Tambo, who fortunately went to exile and started mobilizing for the struggle again to continue.
So many people contributed to the liberation of South Africa and South Africans in general. And they contributed in many different ways. But you chose Umkhonto weSizwe, and that put you right on the front line. And you knew going in that you could lose your life in the process. What compelled you to take that route?
It's not just me, it is many, many black youths. And those that preceded me, those who joined Umkhonto weSizwe before me, those who were in my own township where I grew from, in Dube. I witnessed the death of the first Umkhonto weSizwe, and I was a child then, who I think was John Molefe, who died in the municipality outside the municipality offices, not far from, about 300 meters away from my home, blown to death by the explosive that he had carried in order to go and sabotage that municipality offices, those municipality offices. So I count myself as one of the many who wanted to fight in order to liberate the country, and did not think much about my life. I had no responsibilities at that time. I was just a journalist working for a pittance in the World newspaper, and living this social life that we could live, that had all these restrictions about going to town at certain times. And I had also experienced working conditions in which this job reservation was apparent, where people who were less gifted than me, who had less education than me, held authority over me in the temporary jobs that I took. So I think all South African youth, or most South Africans, experienced it. This very few youths, those who became doctors. There was very little of the middle class in South Africa as compared to the current time. But even they felt this oppression, felt this discrimination against them. because there are things that they could not do. There are places where they could not operate. The Nelson Mandelas with their legal professions, there were restrictions also against them. Lawyers, doctors, and so on. And as I said, I had a neighbor in Zimhlope where we once stayed, who was a gifted person, went to study nuclear physics in Sweden. And because he could not be given the opportunity here and in South Africa in order to do that. In fact, he was given an exile. Whenever you wanted to study things that were prohibited to study in South Africa, you took an exit permit. It means that you cannot return to South Africa permanently. That was the last time that we saw him, because he went to Sweden to study. And there were many others, like Charles Barney, who used to be at Orlando High School. So it didn't matter whether you were middle class or had some education or were poor and working class. You suffered the same consequences of this apartheid regime. So I can't count myself as anything special and in wanting to go and fight for the freedom that all South Africans desired. And I could not have recruited for MK and then go and join and go to school myself. Yeah.
So you did assume a number of leadership roles in MK, and I just wonder how difficult and challenging it must have been at that time. You were fighting against a machine that was well-resourced and supported, and you were building an army and keeping troops motivated, resourced. There must have been a number of challenges. And in leadership, how difficult was it?
Well, we tried to make the most out of a very difficult situation. As you say, the apartheid regime was very strong, had tanks, had aircraft, had more sophisticated weaponry, and had people drafted into it, and it was almost all white, but it also included many black battalions, and also the rural South African Boer community who patrolled the borders and so. But I worked after my training. Of course, the training was very important in the asymmetric war that we had to conduct with the apartheid regime, because we could not confront them with tanks, we could not confront them with the armored personnel carrier, we could not confront them directly. So we had to assume guerrilla warfare, and this was the weapon of liberation movements, guerrilla warfare, from Cuba to other African liberation movements like Frelimo, and so we had to devise means in order to engage the enemy. And especially for me, because when after my training, I was deployed as a commander in the front and given the responsibility for the urban areas where I came from, Transvaal at that time, which is almost the whole of Gauteng. Transvaal Command. I was first a commissar there until the commander Slylo Ramosi passed, and I assumed command of the trial, and for a very long time. And we had a very, very successful machinery. And basically the things that we did were very simple. And as I said, we could not confront this monster frontally. So our training equipped us with the ability to work towards undermining this huge army,
right?
By infiltrating small units into the urban areas, not to confront them, but to deal with their infrastructure, to deal with their police stations to deal with targets that we were equal to, and we had the training to infiltrate weapons, to infiltrate explosives, to infiltrate people, etc. Because I had that even before, the capacity to infiltrate people, because I used to recruit people and we used to pass through the noses of the immigration of officials at Oshuk and other borders in order to take people out for training. And when we came back, of course, the same thing continued, but in more sophisticated ways. We could infiltrate many things. Weapons, I devised ways in which we could infiltrate even up to a bazooka, although initially we were restricted by our own command to infiltrate weapons up to small weapons, up to a Scorpion, small automatic machine guns, until we insisted that we could. And when we attacked the Moroka police station with AKs, then people woke up to the possibility that in fact we could do these things. And I was part of a leadership structure, command structure that enabled that to happen, to begin to infiltrate weapons like the AK-47, weapons like the RPG, and even the material that was that blew up Sasol, I helped to infiltrate into the country.
Wow.
So I can say that we devised ways in which we could communicate with our units inside the country, or they could come to the forward areas to report, and generally, and then we began to undermine this, and people realized, because we realized that from earlier on, and we were also informed by our leadership that our goal at that time was really to undermine the regime, to boost the morale of our people, to announce the return of the sons who had been exiled after witnessing the brutality of the apartheid regime in Soweto.
General, I'm running out of time, so I'm going to fast forward your story. I probably need a whole hour to speak to you, but let's go post 94, and a couple of things. The first one, I'm curious about the challenge of transforming liberation fighters into the national army, and transforming the national army into an army that serves all South Africans. That in many ways I think could have been a metaphor for changing South Africa generally. How did you navigate this?
It was a very difficult process, but we helped plan for it. And among the difficulties we had was that many of those and we decided that we're not going to integrate those that had received proper training, which was, by proper training, I mean both military as well as politically. So you had youths also who were part of what we called the SDUs, Special Defense Units. Those who operated in the country, who had never been to exile, who had never received the schooling, particularly political schooling that we received, because that schooling taught us that the most important thing is politics, that the weapons that we're carrying were to advance the political agenda of the ANC. I think also you would say that of the PAC, but I'm talking for the organization that I served. So we realized, we always knew that the weapons that we carried were to achieve a political purpose, which is to liberate the country and to unite South Africa around a program that we knew. But for some of these youths that we got, integrated in the army did not have that benefit of that long schooling by political luminaries like Jack Simon and others who were in the camps. Yeah.
Okay.
So
again, I'm going to rush you, unfortunately, but you did the work, and I think it was one of the best transitions that we saw in terms of integration and presenting a new face for South Africa.
By the way, we didn't do it on our own. Even before we sent people to train military, because we also had not trained an army in a conventional sense, in the sense that the SADF was trained. So we recognized that we had to get elements of that into our training. So I went to Zimbabwe under the instructions of the ANC and trained many of our people in a conventional sense, staff courses there and so on and so forth. But when we integrated, many of our people were not trained conventionally. So one of the most difficult things we had to do was that all these people, these guerrilla soldiers, had to undergo training again in a conventional sense. And that's where most of the negative things played out, where there was perception of persecution by those who are particularly the middle leadership, like colonels and so on, because those are the people who run basic, who run training and so on. And there were lots of issues between the MK cadres or those who were integrated from MK and other armies with
General Nyanda, again, I have to rush us, unfortunately, but I want to get you back and for much longer next time. Perhaps as a final question and one of reflection. So you then got into politics, government minister, became a diplomat, and continued to serve the country. But at the back of it all, your beloved party, the ANC that you gave and have given your whole life to pretty much, has gone through a number of challenges, and I just want you to reflect where your party is now, and as a veteran, what you hope.
Well, my party has gotten to a point where it lost the right to rule alone, and has gotten into government of national unity, as in other words, is unable to rule by itself. So it's a sad thing because we had a program, we had certain things to achieve, to achieve in a united, democratic, non-racial, non-sexist, and prosperous South Africa. Of course, a lot was achieved during from 1994 up to now. I completely disagree with people who say that the situation now is worse than what it was during apartheid. But of course, I understand the hyperbole and the just the exaggeration, because we see a lot of suffering of South Africans. We see a lot of challenges faced by our country. We see also challenges of corruption, and we also saw the disintegration, or not the disintegration, but the weakening of the ANC, the breakup of the ANC, until very recently the breakup of the ANC by somebody who led the ANC for many years and was part of the leadership of the ANC for many years. So the ANC has been weakened, and largely, fulfilling the words of the prophetic words of Oliver Tambo, who said that the ANC the only people who will destroy the ANC are the ANC themselves. So we see that, and it's very, very sad. But I still remain hopeful, depending on what the ANC does now, that it can salvage itself. But it really depends on it. as in fact it has been responsible for its own demise in a way, to a point where it is unable to rule, which is a pity, because with the government of nations, you see, it is very, very difficult for the ANC to even try to get its programs and its policies through the government, because it is now working with people who are opposed to some of the programs that we want to put in place.
General Nyanda, we really do have to leave it, unfortunately, but I hope we can do this conversation again and speak a little bit more about the post-94 era, because I think there was a lot that you did and were able to achieve also in your various roles. But for today, part one, I'll call it. Thank you so much indeed for joining us, and it's been a pleasure talking to you.
I think it's part 1A.
Yes.
Part 1A, but it's not going to be part 1. Even we're not even touched issue of how we succeeded in the issue of what the SANDF is faced with today.
Yeah.
So we will do that. I hope.
We'll do, absolutely. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's General Spiwe Nyanda, former head of the South African Army, diplomat and government minister, talking to us a little bit about his contributions in life, and we've got to do another conversation soon. Right now, though, a little bit late, but thank you. It's time for news with Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. The UN Refugee Agency, the UNHCR, has reported a rise in Sudanese refugees fleeing to Chad as violence escalates, with nearly 20,000 people, mostly exhausted and traumatized women and children, arriving in the past 2 weeks alone. A Zimbabwean journalist has been released on bail after spending more than 2 months in a prison awaiting trial. Blessed Mhlanga was arrested in February when the TV station where he worked broadcast a press conference critical of the Zimbabwean president. And cardinals from around the world have convened at the Vatican in Rome, Italy, to start the process of electing a new pope. This comes after Pope Francis, the Church's 266th pontiff, died last month. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
All right, let's say good morning once again to Musibudi Makura with our sports news.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda, for the final time this morning on Africa Rise and Shine. We'll start with the tennis news. Defending Rome Open champion Alexander Zverev said he now is on a good path, putting a poor run of form following a defeat at the Australian Open final down to burnout. The 28-year-old world number 2 put an end to the dry run, which included opening round defeats in the Indian Wells competition as well as the Monte Carlo Masters competition by winning the ATP title in Munich in mid-April. The German, who's still seeking his first Grand Slam title, said he should, in retrospect, have taken time off after losing to Jannik Sinner in straight sets in the Australian Open final at the end of January. Zverev said the life of a professional tennis player was a cycle of travelling as well as playing without any time to rest. Zverev, though, said he believed one day he would be world number 1 and also lashed out at the media for belittling him when he was enduring a bad run. Still on tennis news, two-time Wimbledon champion Petra Kvitova won her first match since the birth of her first child, then said she had been close to quit tennis. The Czech Republican player claimed a 7-5, 6-1 win over Romania's Irina Camelia Begu in the first round of the Italian Open in Rome on Tuesday. Her victory ended a run of 4 defeats since the 35-year-old returned to competitive tennis after 15 months away after brother, during which she gave birth to her son. So Kvitova, who won Wimbledon back in 2011 as well as 2014 and reached number 2 in the world rankings, said she had doubted whether she would be able to return to international tennis. Meanwhile, speaking after her win yesterday, she says she's satisfied with her performance.
I'm glad I got a win finally.
Yes.
It took a while. I had some chances even before in some of the matches, but getting the win, I think, is the big relief, I would say. I was, too much focusing on it, so I'm glad it's there. I'm done with it, so I can just go forward and see what the future brings. But I'm very happy how I managed it today. As you mentioned, I was feeling the same on the court, actually, trying, saving those break points, and
On to football news now. PSG forward Ousmane Dembele is fit for tonight's Champions League semi-final second leg against Arsenal. This after recovering from a hamstring injury. The France international was considered a doubt after coming off midway through the second half of last week's first leg at the Emirates Stadium. The 27-year-old, who scored the only goal in North London, missed Paris Saint-Germain's weekend Ligue 1 defeat against Strasbourg, but resumed training on Monday. Dembele, who moved to the French capital from Barcelona back in 2023, is PSG's top goal scorer this season with 33 goals in all competitions. Meanwhile, PSG lead the tie 1-0 on aggregate. Cristiano Ronaldo's eldest son has been called up to the Portugal under-15 squad for the first time. The 14-year-old Cristiano Ronaldo Jr. is at Al Nassr in Saudi Arabia with his father, who signed for the Pro League club in December of 2022. So Portugal great Ronaldo posted a picture on social media of his son's name on the national team list. Ronaldo Jr. has been called up for a youth tournament that will see the likes of Portugal facing off with England, Japan, as well as Greece and Croatia between the 13th as well as the 18th of May. And finally, Liv's golf Dustin Johnson has been given a special invitation to compete in next week's PGA Championship at Quail Hollow Club in Charlotte, North Carolina in the USA, according to the field unveiled on Tuesday for this year's second major. Winners of the last 5 Masters competitions are eligible to play in the PGA Championship, which means the former world number 1 Johnson's exemption from the 2020 triumph in Augusta National had run out. But according to the PGA Championship eligibility requirements, the PGA of America, which is the national governing body as well as the organizer of the major, they reserve the right to invite additional players who did not meet the other eligibility criteria. So the former world number 1 Johnson missed the cut at last month's Masters and has recorded top 210 finishes in 7 live golf events so far this season. The 2-time major winner, who finished runner-up at the PGA Championship in 2019 and 2020, will now be one of 16 live members in the 156-player field next week. And that concludes your sports news this morning on Africa Rise and Shine. More sporting updates coming up in the next hour with the On The Move team. As always, for any sports stories you'd like to share with us, simply send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibu D. Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Got something to say? Are you passionate about issues that matter? Do you have a voice that deserves to be heard? Well, we've got the perfect platform for you. Call in or drop us a WhatsApp on +27 63 406 9126 and we will call you back so you could have your say and be part of the conversation.
30 years of age. I just turned 30 on the 15th of November. So that's who I am,
It's not just talk. It's your chance to air your views. Share your opinion. Engage with a community that values your perspective. Follow us on our social media. Visit our website at www.channelafrica.co.za and get ready to share your views on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
All right, it's time for your business news with Chanduko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Peter and Asanda. Good morning. South African Reserve Bank Governor Lesitja Kganyago says a secure digital consumer identity is key to reducing fraud and strengthening the resilience of the financial system. He made the remarks at the launch of the 2025 G20 Tech Sprint held under the theme Trust and Integrity, Scalable and Open Finance. Kganyago also highlighted that the safe and trusted exchange of credit data across borders could unlock access to services like real-time credit scoring. Innocent Samusa has more.
This year's G20 Tech Sprint is placing the spotlight on open finance with an emphasis on scalable technological solutions that enhance trust and integrity in the financial system. South African Reserve Bank Governor Lesitja Kganyago says the initiative aims to discover world-class innovations that can help regulators tackle key global challenges.
Nigeria has approved a $652 million China Exim Bank funding package for construction of a road to move goods from a seaport and petroleum refinery on the edge of its main city, Lagos, to its southern states. The financing was approved by the Federal Executive Council, chaired by President Bola Tinubu on Monday. The road will be an evacuation corridor from the Lekki Deep Sea Port, the Dangote Petroleum Refinery, Africa's biggest, with refining capacity of 650,000 barrels per day, and is adjoining fertilizer plant to at least a dozen southern states. The Namibia Statistics Agency, NSA, is currently conducting the 2025-26 Namibia Household Income and Expenditure Survey, a data collection exercise aimed at providing current information for national development planning. This will be the fifth household income and expenditure survey conducted, serving as the primary source of household income and expenditure data, crucial for calculating poverty and inequality indicators in Namibia. Statistician General and CEO at the Namibia Statistics Agency, Alex Shimwafemi.
Now, the primary objective is to collect detailed information on income as well as on spending patterns of households across the country. And here I'm referring to households because as a statistics agency, we normally do household-based surveys. Now, the data is very essential for measuring poverty levels in the country. We need to assess the living standards of people in the country.
In Southern Africa, South Africa and Botswana have signed a new agreement aimed at addressing Botswana's ongoing power shortages. This emerged during a recent meeting between South Africa, the South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, and his counterpart Duma Boko in Johannesburg. Botswana has been struggling with intermittent power supply interruptions, leading to increased reliance on imports from neighboring countries. Boko has described the latest agreement as durable and meaningful.
We have now an agreement that we've just concluded in relation to addressing power shortages in Botswana and having a more durable, more meaningful arrangement that departs from what we've had before, which was to buy at emergency prices. Now we've settled it at a reasonable scale, and we will improve our power situation that side in collaboration with South Africa.
The UK and India have signed a free trade agreement which both countries hope will support sectors hit by US tariffs. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi called the agreement ambitious and mutually beneficial. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said it was the biggest trade deal the UK had signed since leaving the European Union.
This is a historic day for the United Kingdom and for India, because this is the biggest trade deal that we, the UK, have done since we left the EU, and it's the most ambitious trade deal that India has ever done. And this will be measured in billions of pounds into our economy and jobs across the whole of the United Kingdom.
1 US dollar in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 605. In Botswana, 13 pula 47. Kenya, the dollar is at 128 shilling 346. Zambia, 27 kwacha 27. BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is at 5 real 69. Russia, 80 rubles 92. India, 84 rupee 40. China 71.21. South Africa $1 is at 18 rand 23. $1 is at 75 pence to the British pound, 88 to the euro. Commodities: gold is at $3,389, platinum at $979 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil $62.53 a barrel. That is all for now. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
South Africa has been ranked 60th out of 158 countries in the newly released 2025 Illicit Trade Environment Index by Traceit. The index is said to be a reminder of how corruption, weak enforcement, and policy blind spots continue to fuel illicit trade and undermine public health, safety, and the economy. This presents a timely opportunity to explore the growing impact of illicit tobacco trade on our economy, health system, and public safety. To respond to these findings, Philippe van Gils, Director of Illicit Trade Prevention at Philip Morris International, joins us now on the line. Philippe, thank you so much for joining us this morning. How are you?
Good morning, Asanda. Thank you for hosting me, and greetings to your auditors.
Awesome. We appreciate your time. South Africa has been ranked 60th out of 158 countries in this 2025 Traceit Index. What does it say about South Africa's handling of illicit trading that we are placed at number 60?
Yeah, so the report outlines some of the strengths of South Africa, and I would take, for instance, some of the taxation and economic environment, regulatory framework, trade, customs and borders, and some of the areas of improvements, which are, for instance, the criminal enablers of illicit trade, or the supply chain intermediaries, and the sectorial illicit trade indicators. And based on those points, the Traceit reports put together some policy recommendation to be considered by the South African government in a public-private partnership mindset.
And what are some of those recommendations? Because having enforcement policies in the country is one thing, but how do we ensure that these don't just remain as guidelines, but they tackle what needs to be tackled head-on and successfully?
Yeah, one of the points that was recommended was taking the example of what Traceit has been doing in Latin America, where they combined 5 countries, authorities, so law enforcement authorities like the customs in this particular case, together with the private sector on a digital platform where in a trustful way information can be changed on the reason of this illicit going on. And so you have across the countries and with the public and private sector exchange that allow to better tackle transnational illicit trade flows, for instance. And here it was also suggested that South Africa could play a leading role within Africa and potentially on the long term even beyond at BRICS level, for instance.
Yes. So some of those strengths then would be that South Africa can play a leading role in terms of cross-border movement of this illicit trade of anything at this point, before we zoom into tobacco.
Yes, correct. That is an opportunity, but of course there needs to be a political will and a driver to do so. There are currently in South Africa streams between the private sector through trade associations like BUSA and BLSA, with the government in the stream of Business for South Africa, which also tackle the criminal aspect of illicit trade. So their initiative, and obviously we we hope to see them materialize step by step and to tackle this big issue that the country is facing.
So looking at tobacco now and the impact of illicit tobacco trade on the economy, what are some of the policy blind spots in tackling this issue in the country?
Yeah, Asanda, you raise a good point. Today, the illicit in South Africa represent more than 60% of the market, cost the government a loss of 18 billion rands per year on the government enforcement. And the reason are multiple. You have, of course, the enforcement, not enough deterrent penalties and sentences, but also regulations and fiscal policy that increase the price gap between the legitimate market and the illicit. And let me take you an example. We as a company invested worldwide more than $14 billion since 2008 to develop scientifically substantiated smoke-free products like heated tobacco products or nicotine pouch. So these are better alternatives for adults who will otherwise continue to smoke. Now, the current tabled tobacco products and electronic delivery system control bill, in its current form, does not incentivize consumers who would otherwise continue to smoke to switch to these better alternatives. So what is the consequence? So consumers continue to smoke cheap and unregulated cigarettes, which one, create a public deficit in terms of revenue, and on the other side do not match the public health objectives of the government.
In terms of what we saw with COVID and the influence that the COVID ban had on the sale of cigarettes, how much of a consideration is this needed to be given, and is it given enough attention when it comes to ways to tackle this problem?
Yeah, it is indeed. The ban do not work, and we saw it not only in tobacco but also in the alcohol industry. It basically propelled the illicit from it was before the COVID time at 30%, and it propelled it to almost 60% of the market. And this is again what we just outlined. If regulation and decisions are made which are not well considered on the consequences, then you're faced with this problem. And now, of course, to reduce that back, it's a much more complicated work that takes time.
And how long do you predict that time will be before we can reverse the effects of the COVID ban on tobacco trade?
Well, I wish it would be as fast as possible, but obviously it created such an opportunity for these illicit traders, and it created such a magnitude that it will take time, but we are hopeful that SARS will take the necessary measures and apply the necessary penalties and sentences to address this problem in the short term.
What are the public safety and health implications that need to be communicated to communities to bring this closer to home for them, the individual on the ground, so that there is public involvement and collaboration with law enforcement on illicit tobacco trade? I think maybe one of them would be what you've touched on offering incentives for those who switch to alternative smoking devices or products.
Yeah, that's definitely one good thing, but it requires also to have the right fiscal framework for this product, so that the price, again, between the price differential between those products and the illicit is attractive enough for this consumer to switch. I also think that one important element is to run a consumer awareness campaign on the implication of illicit trade. I mean, illicit trade finance criminal organizations that are also connected into other, quite often other bad economic impact activities like arms trafficking, like human trafficking, unfortunately. So there is a correlation, and it needs to be important that consumers are aware of that. And then you have also the element of what could be done if the money would be collected in terms of investment for the economic development of the country, in terms of schools, hospital, infrastructure investment. And that's where what we were saying also yesterday in this conference is illicit trade is really an economic issue that needs to be addressed.
Let's talk about different sectors then, in terms of if you believe that a multi-sector approach is going to be key in fighting this illicit trading. And which of those sectors would you say will be crucial on this particular topic that we need to bring together?
Well, if you look like Tracy, that was issuing this report, is an international trade association that will group companies in the sector of fast-moving consumer goods, pharmaceutical, alcohol, tobacco, apparel. So obviously, each of the company has its own expertise in its own domain, but we see when we sit together that there are commonalities in addressing illicit trade across the sectors, and we benefit obviously from each other expertise in the domain that we can share then with the governments in terms of policy recommendation.
Right, lots of work needing to be done on this topic, definitely. Where can we get a hold of that illicit trade environment index by Traceit? Is it available to the public?
Absolutely, it's available on their website, which is traceit.org, and it's publicly available, and everybody can have a look at it.
Absolutely, and we all play our part on that, especially when it comes to the health implications that are as a result of this. Thank you, Philippe, again for your time, and have a great day.
Thank you, Asanda. Have a great day too.
Thanks. Philippe van Gils is Director of Illicit Trade Prevention at Philip Morris International. I think once you bring it home for the ordinary individual, because it's easy to say, well, things are so accessible. Even after COVID, we were banned to buy cigarettes and alcohol, but then there's other avenues that we can, use to get that. But as the public, if you understand what safety concerns and health concerns that could bring up, it makes all of us want to chip in.
Absolutely. And sadly, I wish I could give you a more comprehensive response, but time is not on our side because we've got to go. Thanks for joining us. It's been great having you on the program. Let's do it again tomorrow morning, bright and early, 6 a.m. Central Africa time.
From me, Asanda, Beda, it's goodbye as well. And we hand you over to Onel Nsinzi with the news headlines. And we'll see you bright and early tomorrow morning.
Have a lovely day, Asanda.
You too. Have a lovely day. I'll see you tomorrow. Looking forward to it. Bye, everybody.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Looking at your top stories, the UN Refugee Agency, the UNHCR, sounds the alarm on Sudanese refugees fleeing to Chad, and US President Donald Trump's administration may deport migrants to Libya for the first time this week. Your latest news. Greetings to our listeners. The UN Refugee Agency, the UNHCR, has reported an influx of Sudanese refugees fleeing to Chad as violence escalates, with nearly 20,000 people, mostly exhausted and traumatized women and children, arriving in the